Chapter 373. The dark golden sword radiance of the sky-splitting sword strike was like a lightning bolt that pierced through the air with unparalleled power. Everything happened so quickly that even the elders felt that the dark golden sword light that flashed before their eyes was extremely fast. The students of the Great Qian Sword Mansion subconsciously drew their swords to block it, and an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing exploded. In the next moment, a terrifying force erupted along with an unparalleled sharpness. It pierced through his upper-grade sword weapon and pierced towards his chest. Instantly, there was a sharp pain in his chest as though he was being pierced by a sword tip. He felt as though he was being torn apart and his blood was churning violently, almost gushing out of his blood vessels. He took a few steps back uncontrollably before his feet left the ground and he flew backward. When he landed, he was already below the arena. The student of the Great Qian Sword Mansion forcefully suppressed the churning blood in his body and felt a piercing pain in his chest. When he lowered his head and saw that there was no wound, he couldn't help but feel horrified. The power of conception. That was the effect of the power of conception. What kind of conception was it that it could penetrate his upper-grade sword weapon and affect his body? One stroke, Chumu said softly. His voice was soft, but it sounded like a thunderclap in everyone's ears. One stroke. With just one stroke, Chumu defeated the student who was ranked 37th on the Great Qian Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking. It was so effortless that everything felt like a dream. The elders and students of the Great Qian Sword Mansion were all stunned as they looked at Chumu in disbelief. His figure was deeply imprinted in their hearts. The Great Kuin Sword Mansion students were all in a daze, as if they were lifeless pieces of wood. Their eyes were wide open as they stared blankly at Chumu on the stage. For a moment, they were in disbelief, as if everything before them was just a dream. Great Elder Duanmu Xingkong and the rest were first stunned before they revealed smiles. Chumu really didn't disappoint them. He was 100% sure, and a single stroke was 100% sure. Good, good, good. One of the elders felt the resentment in his chest dissipate, and he felt extremely carefree. 3 goods resounded in the surroundings, as if thunder had exploded. Chumu is indeed a good person. Another elder loudly yelled and couldn't stop laughing. Only then did the Great Kuin Sword Mansion's students come to their senses. All of them were beaming with joy and felt elated. Much of the depression in their hearts had dissipated. Looking at Chumu, they suddenly recalled their previous thoughts and could not help but feel ashamed. It's too early for you to be happy. A furious roar came from the Great Kuin Sword Mansion's camp. A figure flashed and charged towards the battle arena like fire. Even though he was far away, Chumu could feel a wave of heat surging towards him, as though a volcano had erupted. You merely caught Junior Brother Wang off guard. Do you really think you are extraordinary? Let me, the 36th ranked on the Great Kuin Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking, fight you and see what you are made of. His voice was blazing like fire, and fiery red innate sword chi surged out from his body. His entire body was like a flaming meteor as he charged towards Chumu. He unsheathed his fiery red superior sword and slashed out. In an instant, the fire attributed innate sword chi surged between his body and his sword, causing him to become one with the sword. His power increased tremendously, and his sword was like a falling meteor that could destroy heaven and earth. Be careful. Many of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion's students widened their eyes in shock as they instinctively shouted out a warning. The corner of Chumu's mouth lifted slightly, and a sneer flashed across his face. He swung his rapid sky sword, and a dark golden luster flowed. It turned into a dark golden sword light that was as thick as a finger and shot out again. Sky-splitting sword strike. The speed of the dark golden sword light was extremely fast. In an instant, it struck the blazing fireball. With a popping sound, Like a bubble bursting, the blazing fireball paused for a moment before collapsing rapidly. The figure in the fireball also paused in midair before flying out at an even faster speed. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood that splattered across the sky. After landing on the ground, he staggered back over 10 steps before sitting down. He couldn't control the inertia of his retreat, causing his body to roll back twice before coming to a stop. He laid on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. His face was pale, and there was blood flowing down from the corner of his mouth. He looked extremely miserable. This, regardless of whether it was the Great Kuin Sword Mansion or the Great Chien Sword Mansion. Everyone was dumbfounded. Their mouths were so wide open that a fist could be stuffed in. If it was said that the 37th student on the Great Chien Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking was defeated by Chu Mu in a single strike because he had underestimated Chu Mu, and if Chu Mu's speed of attack was a fluke, then the fact that the 36th student on the Great Chien Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking was defeated by Chu Mu in a single strike was enough to show that Chu Mu's strength was extraordinary. Junior Brotherly, how are you? The Great Chien Sword Mansion students hurriedly helped up the student who spat out blood after being struck by Chu Mu and asked with concern. Immediately after, they looked at Chu Mu furiously, but didn't rush up to the arena impulsively. Indeed, the ranking of the Great Chien Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking was a true portrayal of one's strength. For example, the 36th student was indeed more powerful than the 37th student, but there was a limit to it. It would usually take a few hundred moves to determine the victor. Therefore, even if he went up to the arena, he most likely wouldn't be a match for Chu Mu. It was very likely that he would be defeated in a single strike. All right. Let me, Lu Zongshan, take you on. In the Great Chien Sword Mansion, Lu Zongshan's expression kept changing. In the end, he laughed out loud and leaped up like a willow swaying in the wind, landing directly on the arena. Lu Zongshan didn't directly attack. Instead, he landed in front of Chu Mu, facing him from a dozen meters away. His entire body's aura was condensed into one, and his sword aura surged. Around him, a cyclone was created that swept outwards with extraordinary might. There was a piercingly cold gale and a strong wind blowing. Woo sounds filled the entire sword fighting stage, causing Chu Mu's black hair and robes to flutter. However, his eyes stared unblinkingly at Lu Zongshan, not affected in the slightest. On the way here, he had already found out that Lu Zongshan was the most outstanding one among the 10 students from the Great Chien Sword Mansion. It was said that his wind willow swordsmanship was very magical. Not only was it powerful, but it also had other profoundness. Lu Zongshan was delighted to see this, but he was also very fearful of Chu Mu. He saw that Chu Mu defeated his opponents in a single strike twice. If the first time was due to luck, then the second time was a display of his true strength. In the Great Kuin Sword Mansion's camp, the students held their breaths. Lu Zongshan had defeated many people and caused the Great Kuin Sword Mansion to lose face. He was a strong opponent. Now that he was facing off against Chu Mu, they wondered if Chu Mu would be able to defeat him. If Chu Mu couldn't defeat him, then no one in the Great Kuin Sword Mansion would be a match for him. Even if Fang Tianqing, who was ranked first, and Huang Fumeng, who was ranked second, came, it would be useless. The Great Kuin Sword Mansion would still be humiliated. They could only rely on Chu Mu for everything. Lu Zongshan smiled gently, and a green radiance flowed in his eyes. The cyclones around him suddenly exploded with a shocking aura. As he waved his sword, a strong wind whistled and spiraled, filling the entire arena. He used the wind willow swordsmanship right away. The wind willow swordsmanship had 3 major sword moves. The power was different, and the timing of their application was different. When they were used together, it would be even more effective. Raging Wind Willow, Willow Shadow, Thousand Wind, Whirlwind Willow Shadow. The 3 major sword moves were executed one by Lu Zongshan. In an instant, the entire arena was swept up by gusts of strong wind. Countless willow shadows covered the entire arena, making it impenetrable. Junior brother Lu is actually executing all three major sword moves. Even I have to be wary of this power. The great Kuin sword mansion's senior brother, Yao's expression changed slightly. The great Kuin sword mansion students are indeed qualified for senior brother Lu to execute the wind willow swordsmanship at full strength. Looking at the great Kuin sword mansion side, the elders' expressions were solemn while the students' expressions changed drastically. They were extremely worried. As far as the eye could see, there were only willow shadows. They were so densely packed that they covered the sky and the earth. The willow shadows were everywhere and attacked Chu Mu from every angle. They didn't let go of any blind spots. Chu Mu was completely surrounded. It was as if he was swallowed by countless willow shadows. No one could see his figure. The elders couldn't help but reveal a look of worry. The great Kuin sword mansion students also looked gloomy. On the other hand, the people from the great Kuin sword mansion revealed a look of joy. Even Lu Zongshan's face revealed a trace of complacency. They all thought that Chu Mu would definitely lose. At this moment, a dark golden sword gleam flickered among the countless willow shadows. It released an astonishing brilliance. As soon as it appeared, it immediately made everyone feel an irresistible and terrifying sharpness. It was as if nothing in the world could stop it. When the dark golden sword gleam appeared, the countless willow shadows rapidly melted and disappeared like snow under the scorching sun. The complacent look in Lu Zongshan's eyes froze. A dark golden cold gleam was reflected in his eyes as it tore through the layers of willow shadows and charged straight at Jian Wushuang. Fast, too fast! Lu Zongshan's expression froze. He couldn't dodge and instinctively blocked with his sword in front of his chest. At that moment, he only felt the dark golden sword gleam shoot over and accurately hit the sword. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out. The terrifying sharpness directly penetrated the sword and shot towards Lu Zongshan's chest. Lu Zongshan immediately felt as if his chest was pierced and torn by a sword. The pain was unbearable. With a groan, he couldn't help but retreat continuously under the bombardment of the dark, golden sword gleam. He retreated to the edge of the arena and almost fell off before barely stabilizing himself. The sky full of willow shadows on the sword fighting stage had completely disappeared. The blowing gale also quickly calmed down. Only Chu Mu's sword was pointing diagonally at the ground. His expression was indifferent as he looked straight at Lu Zongshan. He slowly opened his mouth and calmly said, "You aren't my opponent either." As he spoke, Chu Mu glanced past Lu Zongshan and looked at the other 9 students from the great Kuin sword mansion. He said loudly and domineeringly, "Which one of you can block my sword?" As soon as he spoke, the wind and clouds surged. It was earth-shattering and caused everyone's expression to change. Was he arrogant or arrogant? At that moment, Chu Mu was like a god that had descended to the mortal world. That moment was imprinted in the depths of one's heart and was irreplaceable. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it at Qijian. Come, your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 374. How can this man be so powerful? The elders of Great Qian Sword Mansion were shocked as they discussed with each other through sword aura. What kind of concept did he use just now? How can it be so powerful? It should be a mutated conception. It's very likely to be a mutated conception of gold conception. Even if it's a mutated conception of gold conception, it's only 40%. How can it be that it possesses 70% of the power of gold conception? The elders of Great Qian Sword Mansion were in disbelief. What kind of mutated conception was that? They searched through the various mutated conceptions that they knew and realized that none of them were as powerful as the one that Chu Mu used. 40% mutated conception has 70% of the power of a normal conception. This kind of mutated conception is incredible. The expressions of the students of Great Qian Sword Mansion changed as their faces turned pale. On the other hand, the students of Great Kuin Sword Mansion were elated and couldn't control themselves. Duanmu Xingkong, the great elder, and the rest nodded their heads as they released their anger. They felt refreshed and comfortable like never before. I was just regretting that I didn't have a chance to fight in Great Kuin Sword Mansion. I didn't expect to see you here. The youngest senior brother Yao of Great Qian Sword Mansion suddenly smiled and said, "Great, I can return to Great Qian Sword Mansion without any regrets." As his voice fell, senior brother Yao's body didn't move at all. Instead, he immediately transformed into an arrow that left the bowstring. Carrying an incomparably sharp edge, he tore through the air. A golden light flashed, and after a breath of time, he appeared on the fighting sword stage, facing Chu Mu from a distance. "My name is Yao Yi, and I'm ranked 30th on Great Qian Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking. My ranking is similar to yours on Great Kuin Sword Mansion's bronze sword ranking," Yao Yi said with a smile. His body was calm, and there wasn't any fluctuation of sword aura. However, his words revealed traces of sharpness that tore through the air. It was frightening. The sword behind his back trembled slightly as though it was about to be unsheathed and fight with the enemy. "Senior brother, Yao is finally going to make a move." The students of Great Qian Sword Mansion were elated. They had high hopes for senior brother Yao. With Yao Yi's help, there's a high chance of success. The elders of the Great Qian Sword Mansion heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. Originally, the Great Kuin Sword Residence was the last stop because it was the furthest away from the Great Qian Sword Residence. It was also because the Great Kuin Sword Residence was the weakest. Routinely coming to Great Kuin Sword Mansion to defeat the top students of Great Kuin Sword Mansion's copper sword ranking before leaving would give him a great sense of accomplishment. However, he didn't expect a variable like Chu Mu to appear midway. Fortunately, Yao Yi was going to make a move. Otherwise, he would have to return with a broken wrist on this trip to the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. When he returned to the Great Qian Sword Mansion, he would inevitably be mocked by the other elders. Chu Mu squinted his eyes. He could see a trace of unfathomable intent from Yao Yi. It seemed like the intent realm that he had comprehended was the gold intent realm, but it also didn't seem to be the gold intent realm. It might be a mutated intent realm that originated from the gold intent realm. Chu Mu thought to himself, and he was slightly excited. Until now, there were very few swordsmen that had mutated intent realms. Yao Yi might have comprehended a mutated intent realm from the gold intent realm. Perhaps it couldn't be compared to his own lacerating intent realm, but it still piqued Chu Mu's interest. This battle could be considered the final battle between the students of the Great Qian Sword Mansion and the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. The outcome would be decided here. Therefore, everyone was watching attentively. With a clear ring, the sword on Yao Yi's back jumped up automatically and shone with a golden luster in midair. When it landed, Yao Yi grabbed it firmly. With the sword in his hand, sword aura surged and overflowed. The sharpness of the sword aura was even more intense. The golden sword aura was like silk threads that twined around Yao Yi's body. It cut through the air and gave off a piercing and dense sizzling sound. It was hair-raising. The sharpness was extremely oppressive. Yao Yi's entire body seemed to have merged with the sword in his hand. It didn't seem like he was using any secret technique, which surprised Chu Mu. As he thought about it carefully, many thoughts flashed through his mind. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with realization. "I see. The intent realm that Yao Yi has comprehended is the gold intent realm and not some mutated intent realm. However, his physique is special. He has an inborn sword body. It should be the gold spiritual sword body among the inborn sword bodies." Chu Mu thought to himself. By now, his knowledge wasn't inferior to others. In some aspects, he even surpassed others. The gold spiritual sword body was a type of inborn sword body. It was innately close to the gold attribute. This allowed the person with the gold spiritual sword body to have a unique ability to cultivate the gold sword aura and sword arts and comprehend the gold intent realm. It could also increase the power of the gold sword aura and sword arts to a certain extent. Yao Yi's sword aura cultivation is not at the peak of the Qi transformation realm. His gold intent realm is probably not at 70% either. It seems like the gold spiritual sword body has just awakened. Although it was said to be the inborn sword body, different people had different manifestations. Some people were born with the inborn sword body, while some didn't. Naturally, the earlier the inborn sword body was awakened, the higher their future achievements would be. No matter what, once the inborn sword body was awakened, it would obviously increase the sword practitioner's power. It was rumored that the normal intent realm under the increase of the inborn sword body would not be inferior to a normal mutated intent realm. However, no one knew if it was true or not. "Take this," Yao Yi yelled. Like a charging army, he waved the sword in his right hand. All of a sudden, a golden sword light pierced through the air and shot towards Chumu. This golden sword light suddenly exploded when it got close to Chumu. It turned into 3 and attacked Chumu from the top, middle, and bottom. It was very sudden. Just this move alone showed Yao Yi's ability. Chumu's expression didn't change as he stabbed out with his speed sky sword. The sword light turned into 3 and gently touched the 3 golden sword lights. There was the sound of glass shattering as the 3 golden sword lights were shattered by the tip of Chumu's sword. They turned into specks of golden light that splashed in all directions. Yao Yi's body flashed and turned into a golden aurora that shot towards Chumu. The sharpness condensed into a single line and was even more terrifying. When Chumu drew his sword, there was an ear-piercing clang. The golden aurora that Yao Yi turned into surrounded Chumu and attacked. The sword in Yao Yi's hand was extremely fast, and every sword was extremely sharp. Everyone's attention was attracted as they widened their eyes. Soon, they felt a piercing pain in their eyes under the golden radiance. They had to blink their eyes to relieve the pain. The people from the Great Qian Sword Prefecture were forced to widen their eyes, as Yao Yi was their last hope. Chumu didn't move an inch as he waved his speed sky sword with his right hand. Every sword strike was ingenious and easily blocked Yao Yi's extremely fast and sharp sword strikes, regardless of which angle Yao Yi attacked from. Yao Yi's sword had compressed the gold attribute, innate sword qi, to the extreme. He had also integrated the gold mentality into it and condensed it on the sword, causing the power of every sword strike to be even stronger. Although normal swordsmen could condense sword aura and concept onto their swords, most of their power would be scattered, and they would not be able to reach Yao Yi's level. Even if it was Chumu himself, it would be difficult to reach this level. This was the difference between having and not having the innate sword body. With the gold spiritual sword body, Yao Yi could easily do things that others would find difficult or impossible to do. Gold mentality has reached 67%, and its power is close to 70% gold mentality. If Yao Yi had awakened his gold spiritual sword body earlier, he would be even more powerful now, and he would be ranked higher than 30th on the bronze sword ranking of the Great Qian Sword Prefecture. Chumu thought to himself as he blocked Yao Yi's attacks that seemed to be everywhere. If others knew that Chumu was still able to think about other things under such attacks, they would be astonished. Yao Yi is indeed powerful. If I wanted to defeat him when I had just returned to the Sword Prefecture, I would have to use most of my strength. But now, until then, Chumu had only used the sky-splitting sword strike to defeat the few students from the Great Qian Sword Prefecture. Although he had comprehended 50% of the tearing mentality, Chumu had only used 40%. There was an obvious difference between 40% and 50%. It was the difference between injury and death. The students from the Great Qian Sword Prefecture weren't qualified for Chumu to use 50% of the tearing mentality. 40% of the tearing mentality was enough to deal with them. After attacking for a long time, Yao Yi knew that he couldn't do anything to Chu Mu. After another 2 strikes, the golden aurora that Yao Yi had turned into soared into the sky. His body appeared in mid-air and golden radiance shot out from his body like needles. He swung his sword and stabbed downwards. In an instant, metal elemental sword Qi surged, turning into streaks of golden light. Every single streak of light was like a metal elemental sword descending from the sky. Every single streak of light was imbued with the powerful metal concept. Senior brother Yao is finally using the ancient sword principle. The students from the Great Qian Sword Prefecture were delighted. An ordinary human-level ancient sword principle could unleash the power of a powerful ancient sword principle in the hands of a swordsman who had awakened the innate sword body. The power is not bad, but it's still not enough. Chu Mu lifted his head to look at the sky and swung his rapid sky sword upwards. Stonequake sword. Minor completion stonequake force. Heavenly origin sword Qi and 40% of the ripping mentality were unleashed instantly. When the powerful vibrating force came into contact with the golden sword radiance, it shattered the golden sword radiance. In an instant, everyone saw Chu Mu swinging his sword. It was dark gold in color again. He swung his sword upwards to meet the descending golden sword radiance. In the eyes of the elders from the 2 great Qian sword prefectures, they could vaguely see Chu Mu's dark gold sword radiance vibrating. However, as the speed was too fast, it didn't seem real. Hundreds of golden sword radiance were shattered by Chu Mu's sword. The power of the Stonequake sword was reduced by 70%, but it was still swinging towards Yao Yi. Yao Yi couldn't dodge and hurriedly blocked with his sword. Immediately, he was hit by the Stonequake sword. His body trembled, and he was thrown up into the sky by the powerful impact. He could feel the sword in his hand vibrating continuously and almost flew out of his hand. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 375. What's the name of your sword move? Yao Yi broke the dead silence. He stared at Chu Mu with sparkling eyes as though he wanted to see through Chu Mu. The elders of the Great Qian Sword Mansion also stared at Chu Mu with radiance flickering in their eyes. Stonequake sword move. Chu Mu answered plainly. The rapid sky sword drew a sword flower and quickly returned to its sheath. It was fast, accurate, and steady. Drawing the sword was a must for a swordsman. Sheathing the sword was also a must for a swordsman. What a great stonequake sword move. It's really powerful. I've lost today. After Yao Yi muttered to himself, he retracted the strange expression on his face and spoke to Chu Mu with a straight face. Using the sword salute to admit his defeat and not being unreasonable made Chu Mu think more highly of him. However, this doesn't mean that your distinguished self is truly stronger than me. In the future, when my cultivation is successful, I will definitely challenge your distinguished self again and truly determine who is stronger. As you wish. Chu Mu answered plainly. It seems that the Great Kuin Sword Mansion has truly produced an exceptional student this time. I hope you can come to my Great Qian Sword Mansion. The top 30 students of my Great Qian Sword Mansion's Copper Sword ranking will be very interested in fighting with you. An elder of the Great Qian Sword Mansion stared at Chu Mu and smiled as he spoke slowly. I'll go if I have the chance. The great elder of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion chuckled, and his face was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart. I believe the Great Qian Sword Mansion won't be disappointed this time. Duanmu Xingkong also spoke with a rare smile on his face. The elders of the Great Qian Sword Mansion gritted their teeth when they saw his expression. They originally thought that they could defeat all the students of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion on the Bronze Sword ranking. They didn't expect a student to defeat them. The huge difference made them feel as though they had fallen from heaven to hell. It was extremely uncomfortable. There's no point in talking too much. The ones who came for the exchange this time are merely the students ranked between the 30th and 40th places in our sword mansion. Moreover, Yao Yi's gold spirit sword body has only been awakened for a short while, so its power has yet to be fully unleashed. An elder from the Great Qian Sword Mansion said coldly, "If you wish to prove that your Great Kuin Sword Mansion's bronze sword roll students are better than the Great Qian Sword Mansion, you can bring people to the Great Qian Sword Mansion for an exchange. I'll definitely welcome you. If I have the chance, I will definitely go." Duanmu Xingkong was not agitated. The exchange of students was not a trivial matter and could be decided casually. Farewell. The leading elder of the Great Qian Sword Mansion cupped his fists and turned to leave. Now that he had lost face, continuing to stay would only add to his troubles, so he might as well leave. "See them off," Duanmu Xingkong said loudly, waving his sleeves and smiling. Soon after, the hall masters and elders all burst into laughter. All of them felt extremely happy. Their hearts were unprecedentedly happy. Suddenly, the first elder's expression changed and then turned into ecstasy. His figure flashed and disappeared quickly, leaving only a fading voice. "I'm about to break through the bottleneck, so I'll go into seclusion first." The elders were stunned at first, but then they became even happier. They did not expect that the first elder would get the opportunity to break through because of what happened today. After breaking through, his strength would definitely be more powerful. The news that the students of the Great Qian Sword Mansion attempted to sweep the inner mansion of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion, but were defeated by Chu Mu, quickly spread throughout the inner mansion. Many disciples who had witnessed it with their own eyes described it with exultation, making people feel as if they were there. The discussion about Chu Mu once again set off a frenzy. "I can use the sword comprehension room for free for 200 hours. This reward is not bad. In the first heaven level sword tower of Astral 9, Chu Mu smiled after learning about the reward from Hall Master Duanmu Xingkong. 200 hours in the sword comprehension room was equivalent to 20,000 low-grade spirit stones and 2 million academic credits. He had only earned 1 million academic credits after guarding the desolate mining area for half a year. Now that I've comprehended the lacerating mentality to 50%, as long as I don't break through to the Qi High Realm, I won't be able to improve much no matter how much time I spend in the sword comprehension room. It's better to use the time in the sword comprehension room to comprehend other things." Thinking of this, Chu Mu took out a book from his high-grade spatial bracelet. Star-shattering swordsmanship. This was a top-notch Earth-level ancient swordsmanship that required 80% of the normal mentality to cultivate. It was one of the rewards that Chu Mu received after defeating many strong opponents in the King of Swordsmanship competition. In the past, Chu Mu had not been able to cultivate it because he did not have enough time to comprehend it. Now that he had comprehended the lacerating mentality to 50%, which was equivalent to 80% of the normal mentality, he had reached the requirement to cultivate the star-shattering swordsmanship. Moreover, now that he had comprehended the lacerating mentality to 50%, it would be extremely difficult for him to improve his sword qi before he broke through to the Qi High Realm. He could put it aside for now and use the time to comprehend the lacerating mentality to comprehend the star-shattering swordsmanship. Thinking of this, Chu Mu opened the star-shattering swordsmanship book and started to read it carefully from the first page. An Earth-level ancient sword art was at least 10 times more powerful than a human-level ancient sword art. At the same time, an Earth-level ancient sword art was also 10 times more profound than a human-level ancient sword art. Chu Mu felt that the book was too profound to comprehend at first glance, but he was not discouraged. He started to read from the first page. Regardless of whether he could understand it or not, he just kept on reading. There were 3 moves in the star-shattering swordsmanship. The words and pictures were not difficult to comprehend. It took Chu Mu half an hour to read through the book. He closed his eyes and pondered for a while, then opened his eyes again and read through the book again. After repeating this 10 times, Chu Mu finally had some understanding of the mysteries of the star-shattering swordsmanship. However, he also felt a little tired and distracting. He knew that this was because he had used too much energy to comprehend the star-shattering swordsmanship. He would be fine after a short rest. Earth-level ancient sword arts were usually practiced by Qi High Realm sword artists. Although there were some Qi transforming realm sword artists who were able to practice Earth-level ancient sword arts, there were very few of them. Those Qi transforming realm sword artists who were able to practice Earth-level ancient sword arts were all geniuses. However, even if these geniuses wanted to practice Earth-level ancient sword arts, they would still need to spend a lot of time and energy. Taking advantage of the rest time, Chu Mu went over the records in the star-shattering swordsmanship book. The star-shattering swordsmanship had 3 moves in total. The 3 moves were linked together. It was an ancient sword art. In other words, to practice the star-shattering swordsmanship, one had to start from the first move, then the second, and then the third. However, some ancient sword arts had separate moves that had different effects. Therefore, there was no need to stick to one move first. Star Glitter, Star Spin, and Star Explosion. For this star-shattering swordsmanship, only by practicing the first move, Star Glitter, to the Deshang realm can one practice the second move, Star Spin. Only by practicing the star-shattering spin to the Deshang realm can one practice the third move, Star Explosion. Chu Mu closed his eyes to rest and muttered to himself. Only by practicing all 3 moves, starting from the first move all the way to the third move, Fragmentary Star Explosion, can the full power of Fragmentary Star Sword art be displayed and cause enormous damage. In other words, if one did not practice all 3 moves of the star-shattering swordsmanship, it would be difficult to unleash the full power of the star-shattering swordsmanship. Even so, Chu Mu still needed to study and practice the star-shattering swordsmanship. The sooner he studied and practiced, the sooner he could master the star-shattering swordsmanship. From tomorrow onwards, I will use the Sword Comprehension Room to study the star-shattering swordsmanship. I will practice the star-shattering swordsmanship after I fully comprehend the 3 moves. If I finish comprehending the star-shattering swordsmanship and have some time left, I can use it to comprehend the sword momentum and the rock-shaking force. Chu Mu thought to himself. Then, an idea flashed through his mind. Oh, right, there is also the essence of clouds. If possible, I can also try to comprehend it. Ever since Chu Mu grasped the essence of tearing, he had never used the essence of clouds. Now that he suddenly thought of it, he felt that if he could also comprehend the essence of clouds to Deshang's level, wouldn't he be able to increase his strength? If he could comprehend the essence of clouds to Deshang's level and integrate it into his body movement and footwork, wouldn't it make his body movement and footwork more unpredictable? Chu Mu ignored all the news outside. Defeating the students of the Great Qian Sword Mansion was just a piece of cake for him. Even if Yao Yi's gold spirit sword body was awakened earlier and his strength was stronger, he was still no match for Chu Mu. The next day, after Chu Mu finished cultivating the 9 revolutions of heaven's origin as usual, he practiced several rounds of the basic swordsmanship and so on. Then he left the sword tower and went to the sword comprehending room again. This time, the students he met along the way all stopped in their tracks and gave Chu Mu a sword salute. Each and every one of them had a smile that came from the bottom of their hearts, causing Chu Mu's mood to be at ease. His steps also seemed to become lighter. The guardian elder of the sword comprehending room had already known about the decision of the mansion master, Duanmu Shinkong, and opened the room to Chu Mu for free. Of course, it was only for 200 hours. If he wanted to continue using the room after the 2 hours, he would have to spend credits and low-grade spiritual stones as usual. Chu Mu didn't say much. He stepped into the room and sat down. He took out the star-shattering swordsmanship book and started to comprehend it. Inside the sword comprehending room, Yi Xuan's spirit was unprecedentedly clear. Reading the contents of the book, he felt that the mysteries of the swordsmanship were vivid on the paper, and he could easily comprehend them. The first reason for this was that Chu Mu had already comprehended some of the mysteries of the swordsmanship yesterday. The second reason was that the sword comprehending room's powerful effects had increased Chu Mu's comprehension ability by many times, greatly reducing the difficulty of comprehending the swordsmanship. After flipping through the book, Chu Mu felt that the mysteries of the star-shattering swordsmanship had deepened. He closed his eyes and pondered for a moment before reading the book from the beginning again. After repeating this process over and over again, Chu Mu was tired, so he rested for a moment and began to comprehend the swordsmanship again. Soon, 10 hours had passed, and Chu Mu had fully comprehended the mysteries of the star-shattering swordsmanship as he wished. It's worthy of being called an Earth-class ancient sword art. Even if I haven't mastered all 3 sword moves, the power of the first move is not very strong, but it still has a unique effect. If it is combined with my other sword moves, it will have a miraculous effect. Chu Mu thought to himself. A strange light flashed in his eyes. He immediately got up to leave the sword comprehending room and return to the sword tower to begin practicing the star-shattering swordsmanship. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 376. Duanmu Xingkong gathered all the academy masters and elders to discuss the matter of sending students to other sword residences for exchange. After the discussion, they decided to cancel the plan, but no one knew the reason for it. None of this had much to do with Chu Mu. Every day, he practiced the 9 revolutions of heaven's origin and swordsmanship as usual. Then, he entered the sword comprehension room to comprehend the essence of clouds. In the blink of an eye, another 20 days had passed. It had been almost 2 months since Chu Mu had returned to the sword residence. Today, in the first heaven-level sword tower of Astral 9, Chu Mu's body shook slightly as he was cultivating. Then he opened his eyes, and a glimmer of light appeared on his face. The bone marrow is finally refined. Next is the bones, Chu Mu said to himself. At this point, Chu Mu had used a total of 30 days to finally finish refining the bone marrow of the heavenly desolate sword body's 3rd piece, Bone Chapter. He had completely transformed it into a heavenly desolate sword. Instantly, he felt that his blood seemed to have undergone some indescribable minute change that was slowly and imperceptibly changing. Bone marrow creating blood wasn't a baseless idea. This way, with the Heavenly Wasteland Transformation Bone Marrow and the Heavenly Wasteland Transformation Heart, the blood's Heavenly Wasteland transformation speed would slightly increase. Chu Mu could relax and cultivate the other chapters. Perhaps by the time he finished cultivating the other chapters, the blood chapter would automatically be finished. Even if it was not completed, it would definitely be more than half completed. Then, wouldn't it be easier to cultivate the other sections? After the refinement of the bone marrow was completed, it was time to refine the bones. The refinement of the bones was relatively easier and did not consume as much energy. The next day, Chu Mu entered the sword comprehension room again to comprehend the essence of clouds. As expected, the essence of clouds broke through to 70% as he wished. Compared to comprehending the tearing essence, comprehending the essence of clouds could only be described as easy. After the essence of clouds reached 70%, Chu Mu switched to comprehending the sword momentum and the trembling stone force. Just like that, another month passed. Deshang's sword force had made some progress on a stable foundation. He had already reached the peak of Deshang, but breaking through to perfection was beset with difficulties. It was as if he had already reached his current limit. On the other hand, the Stonequake force had also reached the pinnacle on the basis of small success. It was only a fine line away from Deshang. In terms of power, It had also increased a little, causing Chu Mu's overall strength to improve again. However, the 9th transformation of the 9 transformations of Heaven Yuan had not been completed yet. Without the 9th transformation, Chu Mu had no intention of breaking through the Qi transforming realm and entering the Qi high realm. But he was not in a hurry. According to his progress, he would be able to complete the 9th transformation of Heaven Yuan within a year. By then, breaking through to the Qi high realm would be a piece of cake. In other words, Chu Mu would most likely break through to the Qi high realm within a year. At that time, he would only be 20 years old. Being able to reach such a high level of sword Qi at such a young age would be one of the best in the entire Qin dynasty. On the first floor of the number 1 heaven-level sword tower, Chu Mu was standing straight with his sword in hand. He was looking straight ahead. Suddenly, there seemed to be starlight shining in his clear pupils. He pulled out his sword as fast as lightning. The rapid sky sword was unsheathed and swung out. All of a sudden, specks of starlight spread out in all directions. There were hundreds of specks of starlight. Every speck of starlight was shining brightly, causing people to be dazzled. Those who had a weak would have lost themselves in the starlight. The rapid sky sword disappeared. It seemed to be hiding in the hundreds of specks of starlight. But because the sword was moving too fast, it turned into hundreds of specks of starlight. This was the first movement of the Broken Star sword art. Broken Star Brilliance! After 1.5 months, Chu Mu had studied this movement intensively. Finally, he had reached the small success stage of this movement. But to reach the level of Desheng, it would take him another 1 to 2 months. From this point, it could be seen that the mysteriousness and difficulty of cultivating an earth-level ancient sword art could be seen. Even with Chu Mu's incomparable talent in sword arts, he would still need to spend a lot of time. Looks like it's time to leave the sword mansion and go out to train. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu said to himself. He looked at the sky outside and saw the wind and clouds change. Going out to train had always been one of his wishes, but because of his lack of strength or other matters, it was delayed. Now, his strength had reached a limit. It would be difficult for him to make any big breakthroughs in a short period of time. This time, I will go out to train and find a sword forging grandmaster to forge the Sky Desolation sword for me. But the Sky Desolation sword body has not been completed yet, so the Sky Desolation sword Qi has not been found. The Sky Desolation sword is not that urgent. In the sword mansion, Chu Mu had also looked for Duanmu Shinkong. Unfortunately, there was no sword forging grandmaster in the inner mansion. The forging of the Sky Desolation sword required at least a grandmaster level sword forging skill. Otherwise, it could not be forged. Chu Mu could not suppress the idea of going out to train. He had to do it, and he had to do it immediately. He immediately left the sword tower and went to the Hall of 100 Affairs to ask to see Duanmu Shinkong. If an ordinary student, even a student on the bronze sword list, made such a request, most of them would have to go through a lot of review. Most of them were not qualified to see Duanmu Shinkong if there was nothing important. But Chu Mu was different. As soon as he asked, the deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs immediately reported it. After a quarter of an hour, there was a response. Immediately, the deacon took Chu Mu to Duanmu Shinkong. You want to go out to train? After Duanmu Shinkong knew the purpose of Chu Mu's visit, he was surprised at first. Then his eyes fell on Chu Mu. He carefully looked at Chu Mu from head to toe 3 times, as if he wanted to see every detail of Chu Mu's body clearly. Yes, Chu Mu answered calmly. Practicing the sword for 100 years is not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. This is a maxim that a senior swordsman once told me. Today, I will give it to you. Duanmu Shinkong did not say whether he agreed or disagreed, but Chu Mu knew what he meant. Practicing the sword for 100 years is like traveling 10,000 miles. Chu Mu learned a lot. Chu Mu murmured. His eyes brightened, and he immediately saluted Duanmu Shinkong with his sword. With your current cultivation, the best place to train should be the Chaos Demon Plane. Duanmu Shinkong nodded and walked slowly with his hands behind his back. He said, "If you can break through to the Chi-Hai realm in 3 years and have the strength to defeat a normal swordsman at the peak of the Chi-Hai realm, remember to go back to the Sword Mansion. If not, you can continue to train." Okay. Chu Mu was slightly surprised, but he did not ask what was going on. If he really had the strength to defeat a normal swordsman at the peak of the Chi-Hai realm in 3 years, he would know when he returned to the Sword Mansion. If he could not, then it would be useless to know what was going on. It would only make him more worried. "If that's the case, you can go now." Duanmu Shinkong waved his sleeves and said softly, "Chu Mu, goodbye." Chu Mu saluted again and left Duanmu Shinkong's place. He returned to the Sword Tower of Astral 9 and began to prepare. Because of the mid-grade and high-grade spatial bracelets, the space was large enough to hold many things. Therefore, Chu Mu kept all the low-grade and mid-grade spirit stones in the bracelets and carried them with him. In addition, he also carried the 2 top-grade swords and many pills, ores, metals, and spiritual herbs with him. These were all Chu Mu's wealth. It was better to carry them with him than to leave them in the Sword Tower. Who knows when they might come in handy? After everything was prepared, Chu Mu flipped through the Great Kuan Dynasty's topographic map and found the so-called chaotic demon plains. From the topographic map, he looked at the route and arranged the direction he needed to go for his training. Then he truly left the sword residence. This time, Chu Mu did not leave by riding the red-crowned crane. He planned to leave on foot, practicing the sword for 100 years and traveling 10,000 miles. Walking was also a kind of cultivation. The principle between the two was actually the same. Chu Mu's departure was only known to Duanmu Shinkong and a few other academy heads and elders. Most of the students did not know about it, and Chu Mu did not specifically tell them that he was leaving. At the peak of Black Wyra Mountain, a figure seemed to walk out of nothingness and appeared out of thin air. Chu Mu stood at the peak of Black Wyra Mountain and looked around. This was the final point of his 3 trials, and it was also the starting point of his entry into the Great Kuan Sword Mansion. Without much emotion, Chu Mu immediately used his movement technique. With a flash, he turned into a gust of wind and blew down Black Wyra Mountain. It was the gale movement technique, but the originally high-grade gale movement technique had changed. It seemed to have surpassed the high-grade and was approaching the super realm. Not long after, Chu Mu arrived at the 3rd trial of the 3 trials, the Failing Crossing. It could be said that the Failing Crossing was the most dangerous trial of the 3 trials, and one careless mistake could lead to one's death. Of course, death was only what he thought at the time. It was only later that he found out that the Sword Mansion's safety measures were in place to protect the lives of the students. Chu Mu's figure was like a gust of wind, and he did not stop. His body was as light as a feather, as if he was weightless. He landed on the first pillar, and with a light tap of his foot he leaped up again. A gust of wind blew, whistling as it turned into a whirlwind that wanted to engulf Chu Mu. Chu Mu's expression changed slightly, but he did not dodge. He allowed the whirlwind to engulf him, and with a thought he moved his sword chi. With the use of the gale movement technique, he actually controlled the direction of the whirlwind, causing it to roll towards the opposite side of the Failing Crossing. It was as if the whirlwind had sent Chu Mu to the opposite side of the Failing Crossing. It looked so natural. The 2nd trial of the 3 trials was called the Wild Bee Honey Forest. Chu Mu entered the Wild Bee Honey Forest again and purposely made some noise. Immediately, a dense buzzing sound could be heard. A black cloud of wild bees flew out from all directions, charging towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu pointed with his finger, and a beam of heavenly origin sword chi shot out, immediately piercing through a wild bee. The wild bee, which could not be dealt with by the 100 refined sword chi and half-step chi transformation sword chi, was now so weak. With the death of the wild bee, The other wild bees were enraged, but Chumu flashed a light smile. His body shook, and he turned into a wisp of green smoke, leaving the wild bees behind, as if he had disappeared without a trace. In the 9 twists and turns of the first trial of the 3 trials, a figure was lightly and quickly flying on the mountain road. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 377. The route that Chumu took was straight. In other words, it was a straight line from the Black Dragon Mountain all the way to the Chaos Demon Plains. On the straight line, there were mountains, rivers, forests, valleys, deserts, and so on. Chumu had to pass through them one by one to reach the Chaos Demon Plains. Although Duanmu Shinkong said that the Chaos Demon Plains was a very good place to gain experience, the journey to the Chaos Demon Plains was also a way to gain experience. After leaving the Black Dragon Mountain, Chumu did not use any movement techniques, nor did he use sword chi. He simply used his physical strength to move forward. At the same time, Chumu divided his mind into 2. While paying attention to his surroundings, he swallowed the desolate elixir and used part of his mind to drive the pure, desolate chi to temper his bones. The difficulty of tempering the bones was much simpler than the bone marrow. It was similar to tempering the internal organs. However, each internal organ was not big, and the bones were connected to every part of the body. Therefore, it was not a small project. Chumu's bone tempering started from the soles of his feet. After the soles of his feet, it spread to his ankles, and then went up step by step. Finally, it was the tempering of his skull. Once the tempering of his skull was completed, it meant that the cultivation of the 3rd part of the Heavenly Wasteland sword body was completed. He could then enter the cultivation of the 4th part. The idea of cultivating the Heavenly Wasteland sword body while walking in the center was also something that Chumu had just thought of. Although walking was also a kind of cultivation, it referred to the long walk to sharpen one's willpower, temperament, and so on. If one could cultivate other things during the long walk, it could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Otherwise, if he wanted to walk from the Black Dragon Mountain to the Chaos Demon Plains, with Chumu's current speed, it would take at least 2 to 3 months. Every day, he would only have some opportunities to cultivate at night. Wouldn't that be too little? The sun was shining high in the sky, and rays of light shone on the earth, covering everything in a layer of golden luster. On the road, there were pedestrians coming and going. Some were riding horses and carriages, while others were walking like Chumu. However, those who walked on foot were usually in groups of 3 to 5. People like Chumu who walked alone with a sword were extremely rare. Therefore, every time someone saw Chumu, their eyes would fall on him and look at him a few more times. They were a little surprised and secretly guessed who this person was. Chumu's sword chi had already reached the peak of chi transformation. However, he had done his best to conceal the ripples of his sword chi. As a result, regular swordsmen would not be able to see through Chumu at all. They would not know what his sword chi cultivation was like. However, looking at Chumu's young age, he didn't seem to be even 20 years old. Naturally, the cultivation of his sword chi shouldn't be that high. It would already be pretty good if he could reach the initial chi transformation realm. If he could reach the initial chi transformation realm, that would be the limit. Chumu didn't care about what other people thought. He just kept walking forward. He climbed mountains, waded through rivers, and crossed through forests. The path he took was the same as the straight line he had marked on the map in the Sword Mansion. There was not the slightest change. After a month, Chumu completed the cultivation of his bones as he wished. He also used pure desolate chi to cleanse his bones and marrow, causing the relationship between the two to become even closer. At this point, he had completed the cultivation of the 3rd section of the Tianhuang sword body, the bone section. Similarly, Chumu didn't use the Tianyuan sword chi to protect himself during this month because of the long journey. As a result, there were many tears in his long robe and a lot of dust and dirt stuck to it. In addition, the shoes on his feet were also worn out. This made Chumu look like a destitute man who lived a difficult life. His black hair was disheveled and half of his face was covered. His face was dark, making people think that he was a savage who had run out from the deep mountains and forests. Chumu didn't care at all. His mind and soul had become very clear after a month of trekking. This clarity made him feel that his soul seemed to have become purer and his spiritual power had increased slightly. More importantly, his 70% cloud concept had naturally broken through to 71% without deliberately comprehending it. Although his 50% tearing concept hadn't broken through, he felt that it was ready to move. As he walked, Chumu didn't pay attention to anything else. He was immersed in his own comprehension and cultivation. The fourth section of the Tianhuang sword body was the meridian section. It was to temper the meridians to the point of transforming them into Tianhuang. Once the meridians were transformed into Tianhuang, they would become tougher and more tyrannical. At that time, they would be able to withstand the impact of stronger sword qi. However, the meridians were like the bones that connected the entire body. However, compared to the bones, the meridians were many times more complicated. Therefore, the time and the number of Tianhuang elixirs needed to complete the transformation of the meridians would probably exceed the consumption of the bones. Until now, in order to complete the transformation of the bones, Chumu had basically used up all the Tianhuang elixirs he had obtained from the Heaven Elixir Pavilion in Border City. In other words, he would need to use ancient Tianhuang elixirs to cultivate the meridian section. 18 ancient Tianhuang elixirs. I wonder how far I can cultivate the Tianhuang sword body? Chumu thought to himself. Even if he consumed all 18 ancient Tianhuang elixirs, he wouldn't be able to complete the cultivation of the Tianhuang sword body. At that time, without the assistance of the Tianhuang elixirs, the cultivation speed of the Tianhuang sword body would be greatly reduced. He didn't know how long it would take to complete the cultivation. For a moment, Chumu couldn't think of any solution, so he could only leave it at that. Today, Chumu climbed over a hill. The sky was dark, and there happened to be an ancient temple at the foot of the hill. The ancient temple had long been dilapidated. 1/5 of the roof tiles were completely broken, revealing the beams. There were countless cracks on one side of the wall, as if it would collapse at any time, but it still stood firm. Waves of flickering flames penetrated through the cracks, indicating that there were people in the ancient temple. When Chumu appeared at the entrance of the ancient temple, several sharp gazes immediately shot over and landed on Chumu. They were as sharp as sword radiance. Chumu didn't care at all. He only glanced around and saw the male and female swordsmen next to the bonfire in the ancient temple. He retracted his gaze and walked into a corner of the ancient temple to sit down, ignoring everyone else. "Where did you come from? Don't you know how to greet us before entering? Isn't that too rude?" One of the swordsmen sitting beside the bonfire suddenly raised his eyebrows and stared at Chumu with a mocking expression. The other swordsman frowned. "Is this ancient temple your personal property?" Chumu calmly replied, "No." The first person was stunned. The other party was startled for a moment before replying. Soon after, he revealed an angry expression. He was angry that this disheveled barbarian actually dared to refute him. He gripped the hilt of his sword, and sword qi surged from his body, causing the bonfire in front of him to sway crazily. The burning of the tree branches made crackling sounds. This ancient temple has already been used by the few of us. We are the temporary owners of this ancient temple. You barged in without the permission of the owner, and even dared to refute. Scram immediately, otherwise don't blame my sword for being merciless. His words were very decisive, and there was a bit of killing intent. It seemed that if Chumu didn't leave the ancient temple, he would draw his sword and cut down Chumu. Sometimes the world of swordsmen was just so unreasonable. It was not uncommon for people to draw their swords and spill blood over a single word. The other swordsmen also looked at Chumu with different expressions, but no one said anything to stop him. Chu Mu glanced at them. There were a total of 5 people, 3 men and 2 women. They seemed to be between 25 and 30 years old, and their sword chi cultivation was also different. The strongest was at the peak of the chi condensation realm and should be around 30 years old. He had a calm expression and seemed to be the leader of the 5. The weakest was at the peak of the initial chi condensation realm. The other 3 were all chi condensation Deshang. The person threatening Chu Mu was one of the 3 chi condensation Deshang swordsmen. These 5 people should be from some sword sect or power, or they could be from some large clan. The possibility of them being scattered swordsmen was very small. No matter what their identities were, in Chu Mu's eyes, they were just 5 ants. Even the most powerful swordsman, who was at the peak of the chi condensation realm, could be killed by Chu Mu in one breath. At this moment, there was an intense flash of light, followed by the sound of thunder. The rumbling sound caused everyone to look up. After 3 breaths of time, there was the sound of rain pouring down. The large raindrops hit the tiles of the ancient temple, creating a cacophony of sounds. The pitter-patter never stopped. Fortunately, the corner Chu Mu chose was relatively intact and wouldn't be splashed by the raindrops. Okay, this ancient temple is not small. It doesn't matter if he's here or not. At this moment, the peak of the chi condensation realm swordsman said in a deep voice. He was very dignified among the 5 people. After he spoke, the Deshang swordsman coldly glanced at Chu Mu and sat back down. Chu Mu closed his eyes and divided his mind into 2 parts. One part was focused on the outside, and the other part was focused on the inside. I didn't expect such a heavy rain. I hope it won't delay our journey. The battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero will be in 2 days. According to our speed, we can definitely arrive before the battle. Chu Mu's expression suddenly changed. The battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero? In the entire Qin dynasty, there were only 81 people who had the title of Sword Hero. Every one of them was a famous person. Their strength was very strong, and they were at the top of the Chi High realm. The battle between the 2 sword heroes could be said to be a grand event. Involuntarily, Chu Mu pricked up his ears and listened attentively to the conversation of the 5 people. The 5 people also seemed to have forgotten about Chu Mu. Perhaps they thought that Chu Mu was not a threat to them, or that the content of their conversation was not top secret. Thus, they did not intentionally avoid Chu Mu. As they talked, more information about the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero was obtained by Chu Mu. Moreover, the location of the battle between the 2 sword heroes was also known to Chu Mu. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 378. The Battle of the Sword Masters was a big event. Once the news spread, it immediately attracted countless swordsmen from far away. Their goal was to see the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Master and the Wild Dragon Sword Master. What was a sword master? A sword master who had reached the Chi High realm, and his understanding of sword force had reached perfection. His use of sword force was unparalleled, and his sword arts were earth-shattering. He was a sword master. The battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Master and the Wild Dragon Sword Master will be at the White Cliff Valley. This valley is coincidentally on my path. Although there is a slight deviation, it is not a big problem. Chu Mu thought to himself as he hurried. In order to watch the battle between the 2 sword masters, he sped up and slightly adjusted his path. Other than Chu Mu, there were a large number of swordsmen hurrying on their way. Sometimes, Chu Mu would hear the contents of their conversations. Their destination was White Rock Valley, and their goal was to watch the fight between the 2 great sword masters. Why were the 2 sword masters fighting? This was something Chu Mu didn't know. A sword hero's strength was too powerful. It was fine if they didn't fight, but once they did, they would definitely attract a lot of attention. Therefore, there were very few fights between sword heroes, let alone life and death. The reason for the battle was not what the swordsmen cared about. What they really cared about was what kind of enlightenment and improvement they could gain from watching the battle between the two sword masters. At the very least, it would be another topic for them to talk about. The White Cliff Valley was an unknown valley. It did not occupy a large area, but this time it became famous because the two sword masters had chosen it as the location for their battle. When Chumu arrived at the White Cliff Valley, there were already many swordsmen gathered there. Some were in groups of 3 to 5, and some were in groups of 10. Only a few were alone. Looking down from above, the entire White Cliff Valley looked like a hollow cone. The area of the valley was only a few thousand square meters. There were many white rocks and no trees or flowers. It was said that the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Master and the Wild Dragon Sword Master was in the White Cliff Valley. If one wanted to watch the battle between the two sword masters, entering the valley was obviously not a good idea. Not to mention whether or not the two sword masters would allow people to enter the valley. Just the battle between the two sword masters would cause sword chi to run rampant. Staying in the valley would be a great danger to one's life. Therefore, the best place to watch the battle was around the White Cliff Valley. However, the White Cliff Valley was much smaller than the other valleys. The edge of the valley could only hold a few thousand people at most, and there were tens of thousands of swordsmen who came to watch the battle. This meant that most of the swordsmen could not stand at the front line to watch the battle between the two sword masters. As everyone knew, it was best to watch from the front line. You could see more clearly and comprehensively. Naturally, if you could comprehend something, it would be more helpful. All of the swordsmen understood this. Thus, the people who had arrived first hurriedly chose to stand or sit at the front line. Chumu glanced around and saw a position on the front line. His figure flashed and appeared there before he sat down. It's him, that guy who looks like a savage. When Chumu appeared at the front line of the White Cliff Valley, a low voice sounded in his ear. He casually glanced around and saw 5 familiar faces. Weren't they the 5 swordsmen he had met in the ancient temple earlier? It seemed that these 5 guys had arrived earlier than him and had also occupied the frontline positions. One person actually dares to occupy the frontline position. He will definitely be chased away later. If he doesn't know what's good for him, he might even lose his life. The 5 people's words did not cause Chumu to have any thoughts. Instead, he shifted his gaze to other places. With a glance, he saw more and more swordsmen rushing over to occupy the front-line positions. Then he shifted his gaze to the valley. The distance between his position and the valley was about 100 meters. It was a relatively safe distance. If there was any sword chi, he could easily avoid it. Looking down from above, he could see everything in the valley clearly. It was really the best place to watch the battle. Get lost. This position is mine. You're the one who needs to get lost. Then you can go die. As soon as the words were spoken, the sword chi spread out. Sword light flashed and collided. Many swordsmen's gazes were attracted. Some were slightly startled, while others had smiles on their faces. At this time, the front line positions in the valley were almost fully occupied. The few remaining positions immediately caused many swordsmen to fight for them. For this reason, these swordsmen even drew their swords and fought, wanting to spill blood. If you want to fight, go to the side. Don't get in our way. Otherwise, we don't mind killing both of you. Some swordsmen who were affected were angry and threatened. For a moment, murderous aura filled the air. The atmosphere became very tense, like a taut string. As the murderous aura spread out, the surroundings suddenly quieted down. The swordsmen were all on alert, their eyes flashing. Behind them, more and more swordsmen arrived. When they saw that the front line positions were all occupied, they immediately frowned. Their eyes flashed with a sharp light. Their gazes seemed to be solid as they slowly scanned the swordsmen on the front line, like hunters looking for prey. The sharpness of his gaze immediately caused some of the weaker swordsmen to tremble uncontrollably when he looked at their backs. They were extremely nervous, afraid that they would be chosen and become a target. When that time came, they probably wouldn't have much ability to fight back. However, some things could not be avoided. Some of the weaker swordsmen were indeed targeted. Chumu saw with his own eyes that many of the swordsmen who had already taken the front-line positions were chased away. In the face of the difference in strength, they did not dare to say anything. They could only sullenly give up their positions. Unfortunately, the 5 swordsmen that Chumu had encountered in the ancient temple were also targeted. They had originally planned on resisting, but in the end the 4 swordsmen's sword chi had all reached the great perfection of the chi transformation realm. All of their sword chi undulations were powerful, causing their expressions to change drastically. In the end, they had no choice but to give up their positions and obediently retreat. "I want your position!" A cold voice rang out from behind Chumu, bringing with it a sharp pressure. Chumu was slightly startled, so he had also been targeted. The 5 swordsmen who had been chased away were very close to him. As a result, some of them revealed gloating smiles. It was as if they wanted to see others suffer in order to feel better. "I think you've chosen the wrong person," Chumu replied softly without even turning his head. "I'll count to 3. If you don't leave, don't blame me for being merciless." The swordsman behind Chumu did not move at all. His voice became even colder and sharper. He gripped the hilt of his sword and pulled it out slightly. A sharp coldness spread out. 1, 2. The person actually began to count. "You disciples of the Moro sword sect really are a disgrace. You only dare to pick on those poor swordsmen." Before he could say 3, someone immediately interjected with a hint of mockery. Only then did Chumu realize that the person who had threatened him was a disciple of the Moro sword sect. However, so what if he was a disciple of the Moro sword sect? He could feel the ripples of his aura. He was only a great perfection of the chi transformation realm swordsman. He had not reached the peak yet. "We disciples of the Moro sword sect have always done as we please," the person replied coldly. This person coldly replied. Immediately, the word 3 left his mouth. Seeing that Chumu still hadn't moved, his right hand moved and a sonorous sound rang out. A sharp sword was unsheathed, and the sword light condensed into a waterfall that pierced towards Chumu's back like a rainbow. No wonder he was a disciple of the Moro sword sect. He could attack a stranger so viciously. This sword was too fast and too sudden. At such a close distance, everyone's expression changed slightly. At the same time, a smile of pity or bloodlust appeared on their faces. It was as if they could see the poor swordsman being pierced through by this sword. Blood splattered across the sky. The disciple of the Moro sword sect also widened his eyes, and a sharp killing intent flickered in his eyes. His expression became ferocious and bloodthirsty. Suddenly his sword missed, and the sharp sword chi immediately pierced a hole in the ground, sending dirt flying everywhere. Before he could react, he vaguely saw a trace of disbelief appear on the faces of the others. In the next moment, he felt a slight sharpness approaching him. Chumu's figure appeared on the left side of the Moro sword sect. Disciple unsheathed his rapid sky sword. The Moro sword sect disciple only felt the sharpness approaching him like lightning. For a moment his scalp went numb. The sharpness of the sharpness made his skin feel like it was being torn apart. At that moment he hated himself for not being faster, for not being able to move faster. No matter what, the moment he drew his sword and stabbed at Chumu, his fate was already decided. He was dead for sure. Without using any sword techniques, only the sword chi of the heavens, origin sword, and the concept of tearing had been infused into the sword. The rapid sky sword stabbed out like a bolt of lightning before being sheathed again. Chumu's figure turned in the air and miraculously returned to his original spot. He sat down in the exact same spot as before. In the next moment, the Moro sword sect disciple's eyes suddenly widened. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. His mouth was wide open as well, as if he was about to make a sound. But before he could make a sound, there was a hissing sound. A stream of blood shot out from his throat like an arrow. In the next moment, the Moro sword sect disciple's entire body began to tremble violently. He could no longer hold his sword, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Immediately afterwards, his body slowly fell backwards. With a thump, he kicked up a cloud of dust. Life and death in a single moment. Everyone was stunned. A few seconds later, when they looked at Chumu again, their gazes were filled with reverence and shock. They did not dare to underestimate him at all. Some of the swordsmen who had also chosen Chumu as a target hurriedly dismissed that thought. They still could not figure out how to deal with the attack just then. It was just too fast. If they were in his shoes, they would have been killed in a single strike as well. Your strength is indeed unexpected, but you actually killed a disciple of my Moro sword sect. From now on, you will be someone that my Moro sword sect must kill. Kill him and take revenge for Senior Fong. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 379. What's wrong with me recently? I don't have many clicks, recommendation votes, or even monthly votes. It's so sad, so sad, so sad, so sad. This time, there was more than one Mo Luo sword sect disciple here. After Chu Mu killed the Mo Luo sword sect disciple, there were many more Mo Luo sword sect disciples rushing over, all of them yelling with killing intent. If the situation continued like this before the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Mad Dragon Sword Hero, there would be a huge battle here. Some of the swordsmen frowned. They had come all the way here just to see the battle between the two sword heroes, but some of them were very excited. On one side were the Mo Luo sword sect disciples, and on the other side were the defeated swordsmen. Could it be that before the battle between the two sword heroes, there would be an appetizer here? The heaven origin sword chi in his body increased in speed. Chu Mu did not mind a massacre before the battle between the two sword heroes. Suddenly, two incomparably powerful auras swept over from afar. One of them was incomparably sharp, as if everything in the world would be sliced into pieces. It was unstoppable, causing people to tremble all over. It was as if an invisible sharp blade was slicing their bodies, causing them to feel waves of pain. The other chi was extremely domineering. It had the arrogance of looking down on everything in the world as if they were ants, making people feel small and insignificant. The two auras came from different directions and collided with each other in the sky above the White Rock Valley. Suddenly, a series of terrifying explosions rang out. Everyone could vaguely see the air above the White Rock Valley changing. The impact of the explosions was terrifying. The Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Mad Dragon Sword Hero are here. A swordsman shouted. Immediately, the Mo Luo sword sect disciples who were about to shout and kill all stopped. Their expressions changed as they hurriedly channeled the sword chi in their bodies to resist the pressure of the two chis. Not only them, the tens of thousands of swordsmen who were gathered here all channeled the sword chi in their bodies to resist the pressure of the two chis. Even Chu Mu was no exception. How terrifying! Chu Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he hadn't seen anyone, the aura emanating from them already possessed such might. One could only imagine how terrifying the strength of the two great sword heroes was. A normal peak chi high stage sword warrior would not be able to withstand even one attack. Chu Mu's heart became more and more eager to see the battle between the two sword masters. His intuition told him that watching the battle between the two sword masters would definitely be of great help to him. After that, a cold snort resounded in the heavens and the earth. This snort was like the edge of a sharp sword, causing one's eardrums to feel as if they were being sliced and torn apart, and it was extremely uncomfortable. On the other hand, a burst of wild laughter resounded at the same time, and a heroic feeling instantly filled the heavens and the earth. It filled the other side of the eardrums of all the swordsmen, and a buzzing sound rang out in their heads, causing them to feel dizzy and having a splitting headache. Torture. Both sides were torture. It was an unprecedented feeling of discomfort. Chu Mu had no choice but to use his sword energy and concept power to seal his ears. Only then could he barely resist. Looking at the other swordsmen, those who were slightly weaker were all pale and on the verge of collapse. There were even some whose ears seemed to have been pierced, and 2 streams of blood flowed out. Swordmaster's voice was actually so fierce and powerful. If this were to happen a few more times, a portion of the tens of thousands of swordsmen here would probably die on the spot, while the rest would be heavily injured. Immediately after, a sharp whistle and a violent whistling sound surged over from different directions. The sharp whistle was like a sharp sword piercing through the air, and the violent whistling sound was like the roar of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. After 3 breaths, the swordsman saw 2 figures appear on each side. These figures rapidly approached, and in the blink of an eye, they appeared in human form. In the next blink of an eye, they were clearly visible. After 3 blinks of an eye, the 2 figures flew to the sky above the white rock valley, facing each other from a distance of 100 meters. The 2 of them stood quietly more than 300 meters above the swordsmen, with sword energy wings spread out behind their backs. With the ability of a sword master, they were still unable to soar in the sky without using a secret flying technique. With the appearance of these 2 people, the terrifying aura from before was instead much more restrained, and the impact on the swordsman below was not as strong as before. However, Chu Mu knew that this was the result of the 2 sword masters restraining their auras. The range of their influence had shrunk, but the auras within that range had become even more intense and terrifying. Even if he were to enter the range of the auras of the 2 sword masters, he would most likely not be able to withstand it and would definitely be injured under that terrifying aura. Everyone's gaze was attracted to the 2 figures in the sky, and they were unable to move away. The 2 sword masters coldly looked at each other. They were 100 meters apart and did not say a word, but after their auras had been compressed and collided with each other, the air within the range of their auras became extremely heavy. The auras of the 2 sword masters had been compressed to a range of 100 meters, forming a sphere. The edges of the sphere were clearly visible to the swordsmen, and they could even see that within the sphere of aura, there were fine golden and purple electric arcs jumping. There were more and more of them, and they became denser and denser, producing endless, terrifying, crackling sounds. The spheres of aura collided, and the impact of countless electric arcs became even more violent, as if they were going to destroy everything. Even the dust in the air was completely shattered. Bursts of explosive sounds came from the 2 spheres of aura. It was earth-shattering, and when it reached the ears of the swordsmen, it immediately caused their hearts to beat uncontrollably, their blood to flow faster, and their skin to turn red. The 2 sword masters had not even drawn their swords, but just the collision of their auras already possessed such power. Once they fought, how earth-shattering would it be? The tens of thousands of swordsmen below all forgot to breathe. Their attention was completely attracted by the 2 sword masters in the sky, and they were immersed in shock. Qian Fenghan, 10 years ago, we did not have a clear winner. 10 years later, we will fight again, and this time, I will definitely defeat you. The Mad Dragon Sword hero laughed out loud. His majestic body was indomitable, and his broad shoulders seemed to be able to hold up the sky. His heroic laughter resounded in all directions, and he was filled with strong confidence. The Mad Dragon Sword hero was tall and muscular. He was wearing a dark purple robe with dragon patterns on it. His eyes were filled with tyrannical intent, and there was a dark purple sword on his back. His aura was unparalleled. As for the gold-shattering sword hero, he was tall and could be said to be handsome. He was wearing a light golden robe with sword patterns on it. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were long and narrow. There was an incomparably sharp luster at the corner of his eyes. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was extremely sharp. The aura he revealed was extremely sharp, and it could cut through everything. Huang Fu Long Quang, the winner of today's battle is me. Qian Finghan's words were concise and to the point. As he spoke, the sharpness at the corner of his eyes shot out to a distance of 10 feet. Gold-shattering sword hero Qian Fenghan, Mad Dragon sword hero Huang Fu Long Quang. There were 81 sword heroes in the Great Kuan Dynasty. One of them was from the Real Flame Sword Sect, and the other was from the Great Kuan royal family. Huang Fu Long Quang, a member of the royal family. Could he be a student of the king's palace? Chu Mu had a flash of inspiration. Thinking about it, it made sense. The title of sword hero could only be obtained by Qi High Realm sword artists. And those who could obtain the title of sword hero were mostly disciples of big forces, such as the 4 big sword sects and the Great Kuan Sword Palace. Ha 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 ha. This is what makes it interesting. The Mad Dragon sword hero held the hilt of the sword on his back. With a little bit of force, an earth-shattering sound rang out. Following that, a tyrannical aura spread across the sky. The dark purple sword light pierced through the sky. The dark purple sword was already unsheathed and held in his hand, pointing straight at the gold-shattering sword hero. The Mad Dragon sword hero's Mad Dragon sword was said to have reached the peak of extreme grade sword. It was infinitely close to a king grade sword. The tip of the sword pointed straight at the gold-shattering sword hero. A terrifying tyrannical aura repelled the air, as if it was cutting a path through the air. The gold-shattering sword hero's eyes twitched slightly. The long sword on his back automatically flew up. A bright golden light shot out in all directions. It was extremely sharp, and it directly shattered the tyrannical aura of the Mad Dragon sword. With the extreme sharp sword in his hand, he pointed it straight at the opponent. There was still a sharp light shooting through the air. The extreme sharp sword was like the Mad Dragon sword. It was also an extreme grade sword that was infinitely close to a king grade sword. It was not something a normal extreme grade sword could compare with. The Mad Dragon sword was dark purple in color. It was as wide as a palm, and there were fierce dragon patterns on it. It was so vivid that it seemed as if it was about to leave the sword and soar into the sky. The sword guard was like a dragon spreading its wings. It was extremely tyrannical. The extreme sharp sword was only 2 fingers wide. It was much thinner than a normal sword. It was golden in color, as if there was a golden light flowing through it. It cut through everything as it passed by. Are they finally going to make a move? Chu Mu thought to himself. In the next second, the gold-shattering sword hero and the Mad Dragon sword hero retracted their wings. Their bodies were falling rapidly. The 2 of them were still in the air with their swords pointed at each other. It was as if the high speed of falling did not affect them at all. The 2 sword heroes were 300 meters above the ground. They were more than 400 meters away from the White Cliff Valley. A normal Qi High Realm sword artist would be shocked if they fell like this. However, the 2 of them were extremely calm. It was as if it was not 400 meters, but only 4 meters. They were like 2 shooting stars, bringing with them a terrifying whistling sound. The swordsmen only felt that there were 2 vast streams of flowing light before their eyes. Immediately after, they heard 2 rumbling sounds explode from the valley over 100 meters below them, turning into terrifying sound waves that surged toward them, causing their eardrums to ache slightly. Rocks were shattered and dust flew into the air. It slowly swept through the entire valley and rushed up violently, blocking the vision of all the sword artists. Although they could not see clearly for a moment, they could hear the ear-piercing sounds of metal clashing coming from the valley at a frightening speed. Through the billowing dust and smoke, they could vaguely see 2 different colored lights intertwining and slashing against each other, causing the billowing dust and smoke to become even denser. All of the swordsmen widened their eyes and waved their sleeves, trying their best to blow away the dust. Otherwise, the battle between the 2 great swordsmen in the valley had already begun, but they couldn't see it clearly because of the dust. What kind of waste would that be? However, there was too much dust and too thick. No matter how hard the sword artists waved their sleeves, they could not get rid of it. Instead, it made the dust roll even more. Chu Mu squinted his eyes. Through the rolling dust, he could faintly see the two swords colliding at high speed again and again. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 380. Disperse. Disperse, an incomparably excited voice sounded, and the billowing dust finally faded and dissipated. The swordsmen all looked down, and their eyes were wide open. They could clearly see what had happened in the valley. Suddenly, their expressions changed, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. They did not know when, but the White Cliff Valley, which was thousands of meters wide, had been destroyed. Sword scars that were hundreds of meters long were all over the place. Many of the hard white rocks had been cut or shattered by the sword wind. It was like a ruin. Chu Mu glanced at the destroyed valley, and his attention was completely focused on the two sword masters. One was dark purple, and the other was gold. They were constantly waving the swords in their hands to attack each other. Every sword was overbearing, and every sword was sharp. The gold fragment sword master and the wild dragon sword master had different styles, and the aura of their swords were also very different. What the gold-shattering sword hero comprehended was the concept of gold. Every sword strike was sharp and unimaginably sharp. With a single strike, any hard object would be sliced open and pierced through. The berserk dragon sword hero had comprehended the concept of thunder. Every sword strike was majestic and domineering, so domineering that it was hard to imagine. With a single sword strike, everything in the surroundings would be destroyed. They were indeed sword masters. Although they were not experts in speed, the speed of their swords was so fast that the Chi transformation stage swordsmen could not keep up with them. They could only vaguely see a gold sword and a dark purple sword light colliding in the valley. At this time, many figures flew over from afar and appeared in the sky above the White Cliff Valley. The aura they emitted was very strong, and they were obviously Chi high-stage swordsmen. Chu Mu was wondering why most of the tens of thousands of swordsmen who had rushed over were Chi transformation stage swordsmen. There were only a few Chi high-stage swordsmen, and there were less than 1,000 of them. Logically speaking, a battle between sword masters should be more helpful to a Chi high realm sword artist than a Chi transformation realm sword artist. Thus, the Chi high realm sword artist should be the first to arrive. Now, there were finally a lot of Chi high realm swordsmen who used their flying techniques to arrive. The sky above the White Rock Valley was filled with Chi high realm swordsmen. With their cultivation, it was not difficult for them to use the secret flying technique to stay in the air. Since that was the case, there was no need for them to fight for position with the swordsmen below. After all, the battle between the two great swordsmen had already begun. The pressure from the thousands of Chi high swordsmen above made the Chi transforming realm swordsmen feel extremely uncomfortable. It was as if they were being suppressed by a mountain of swords. But soon, as they focused on the battle between the two sword masters in the valley, they forgot about everything else. They even ignored the aura that the thousands of Chi high swordsmen naturally emitted. Chu Mu's eyes slightly narrowed. His eyes flickered with an unprecedented blazing light. His vision sword, which had already been trained to perfection, was only able to see a golden and a dark purple figure. However, he was only able to see about 50% of them. Frowning slightly, Chu Mu did not understand. Logically speaking, with his vision sword to perfection, the speed of the two great swordsmen should not be extremely fast. He should be able to see them clearly. Why was there a situation where he could only see about 50% of them? Thinking about this, Chu Mu focused his attention. He did not look at the battle between the two swordsmen. Instead, he focused on observing the surroundings of the two figures. After a while, Chu Mu finally understood. It turned out that there were countless auras surrounding the two great swordsmen, causing the air to be distorted. This caused the refraction of light to be distorted, making it impossible for him to see clearly. The auras were not intentionally created by the two great swordsmen. It was because their swords were too strong. When they attacked with their swords, it naturally caused the aura around them to change. This caused all sorts of distortions and refractions, making it difficult for others to see clearly. Chumu estimated that he would need to break through to the Chi High realm with his sword Chi and perfect the vision sword to be able to see through the layer of distorted aura. Or he would need to practice some kind of secret art related to his eyes to be able to see clearly. He had perfect vision sword and had extraordinary eyesight, but he could only see about 50% of them clearly. It was not hard to imagine that for other swordsmen, being able to see 20% would already be very good. Immediately, he got rid of all distracting thoughts. His eyes stared at the two figures and focused on them. His brain was operating at high speed, and everything that he saw was recorded in his mind. It did not matter if he could comprehend anything now. He would just memorize it first. In the battle between the two great swordsmen, every move and every sword was so profound and unfathomable to them. If they could memorize it and study it carefully, they would be able to understand one or two of them. It would definitely be of great help to their own swordsmanship and improve their own strength. Chumu realized that in the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Master and the Wild Dragon Sword Master, they did not use any kind of ancient sword arts. They were just using their swords. However, each of their swords contained great power. Each of their swords sliced and shattered. They were incomparably sharp and domineering. Even the sword wind that shot out after the collision contained terrifying power, easily slicing apart the hard white rocks. As everyone knew, the sword wind was the movement of the air when a swordsman swung his sword. Originally, it did not have much power. Even if it was a normal Chi-Hai swordsman, the sword wind would at most make people feel like they were being blown by a strong wind and would not be harmed at all. But the sword wind of the two great swordsmen was so terrifying. Its sharpness was even greater than a low-rank sword. The hard white rocks were even more fragile than tofu. What a condensed power! Chumu could not help but sigh. The Gold Fragment Sword Master's sword was full of sharpness. Its speed was even faster than the Wild Dragon Sword Master's, and the angle of its attack was more tricky. Every sword attack was filled with killing intent, while the Wild Dragon Sword Master's sword was extremely domineering. It was like a dragon flying through the 9 heavens, full of power. The two of them had one thing in common, and that was condensing power. No matter if it was the sword Chi, their own power, or the power of concept, they were all incomparably condensed. It was as if they had completely merged with the sword in their hands, maximizing their power. Although many Chi transformation stage swordsmen, especially those genius swordsmen, would condense their sword Chi and power of concept onto their swords during battle, maximizing the power of every sword attack compared to the Gold Fragment Sword Master and the Wild Dragon Sword Master, it was many times weaker. It was at least 10 times stronger. The power of every sword attack like this would not be inferior to a human-tier ancient sword art. It might even be close to an earth-tier ancient sword art. With such a sword and such a power, why would they still need to practice any ancient sword arts? All kinds of thoughts flashed through Chumu's mind. His eyes flickered with a sharp light that was comparable to the sword Chi, reflecting the two figures in the valley. After the collision, the two figures rapidly retreated. Soon after, the Gold Fragment Sword Master stabbed out, turning into an incomparably resplendent golden sword Chi that pierced through the void. The coldness caused people to shudder, as if even the hardest thing in the world couldn't withstand it. Good. The Wild Dragon Sword Master let out a shout. He raised the dark purple Wild Dragon sword in his hand and slashed down. A dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth. The dragon patterns on the Wild Dragon sword seemed to have come alive, bursting out rays of light. It was as if a dark, purple dragon shadow had appeared behind the wild dragon swordmaster, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, roaring towards the sky. The dark, golden sword chi had the shadow of a dragon entwined around it. It rushed out and collided with the gold fragment swordmaster's resplendent golden sword chi. The earth-shattering rumble was earth-shattering. That resplendent light was so dazzling that it caused people to subconsciously close their eyes as if they were pricked by needles. Even Chumu had no choice but to blink his eyes to prevent his eyes from being injured. Next to their ears, there was an incomparably sharp rumbling sound that caused people's scalps to go numb and their bodies to tremble. Especially that terrifying and tyrannical sword chi that was transmitted from over 100 meters away made them feel terrified. It was as if a sharp sword was about to cut their bodies apart. When they opened their eyes, they saw that in the center of the White Cliff Valley, there was a huge pit that was over 10 meters wide. With the pit as the center, there were dozens of sword marks that were as thick as an arm extending out in a straight line, reaching hundreds of meters away. The gold fragment sword master and the wild dragon sword master's sword chi fluctuated incessantly, but it was controlled by them. It looked as if the golden and dark purple flames were burning fiercely. In the next breath, the two figures moved again and the battle resumed. Chu Mu stared blankly at the huge pit and the dozens of sword marks that were hundreds of meters long. He could only feel a chill run down his spine. Strong, they were too strong. He had a feeling that even if he trained the third move of the Broken Star sword art to the Deshang realm and raised his sword chi to the Chi-Hai realm, he would not be able to cause such a huge destruction. And this kind of destruction seemed to be the result of the two sword masters' slightly serious attacks. It was hard to imagine what kind of destruction would be caused if the two of them fought with all their strength. So that's how it is. This stab can be used like this. In the sky, there were Chi-Hai realm sword masters who had suddenly realized something. It was as if they were talking to themselves, but also as if they were discussing with the people next to them. Chu Mu was completely immersed in watching the battle. He forgot about everything around him. Gradually, there were only two figures in his eyes. One was golden, and the other was dark purple. Both of them were burning fiercely as they continuously clashed with each other. Sword force, it's actually sword force. I see. All kinds of understanding appeared in Chumu's mind. He finally realized that the reason why the two sword masters' attacks were so powerful was because each of their attacks contained the power of sword force. In other words, the two sword masters had not only reached the perfect stage of sword force, they had also normalized their sword force. Thinking of this, Chumu could not help but be startled. Previously, when he was still in the desolate mining area, he had this thought, but he dismissed it himself. Sword force was the interpretation of a swordsman's will and spirit. It was the combination of a swordsman's understanding and understanding of the sword. Every time it was used, a large amount of spirit would be consumed. Thus, it could only be used as a trump card. But now, watching the battle between the two sword masters, this sword force had changed from a trump card to a normal attack. What kind of mystery was behind this? Unconsciously, Chumu entered a deeper level of observation and understanding. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 381. Ha 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 ha. Today's battle has allowed me to fight to my heart's content. But if we continue to fight, it will be hard to tell who is stronger. Why don't we decide this with one move? Mad Dragon Sword Hero's bold and domineering laughter resounded through the clouds. His whole body soared into the sky, and there seemed to be a dark purple dragon's shadow around him. Then, regardless of whether Gold Fragment Sword Hero was willing or not, Mad Dragon Sword Hero's aura became even more intense. It was 10 times stronger than before. It was the full power of his sword aura. The dark purple dragon shadow around him became clearer and clearer as he roared towards the sky. The dark purple mad dragon sword was raised up high. His body soared hundreds of meters into the sky before stopping. The horrifying sword aura was like a tsunami. Mad dragon sword hero's eyes suddenly widened, and a bright light pierced through the air. He roared like a dragon roar in the sky, and with both hands holding the sword, he slashed down. Mad dragon dominates the world. The dragon pattern on the dark purple sword shot out thousands of lights. A dragon shadow appeared with 3 claws. It was clearly visible, and its power was unparalleled. It condensed the sword aura and sword chi and dove down. This dark purple dragon shadow was 1/2 meter thick and 20 meters long. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws. When it opened its mouth, it seemed to be able to swallow mountains and rivers. All of a sudden, all the sword artists felt like they were being locked down and suppressed. It was as if that thick dragon shadow's target was them, and it wanted to destroy them. All of them couldn't move, and their hair stood on end. Gold Fragment, sword hero, Qian Fenghan, suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. His pupils shrunk and turned into a pure gold color. 2 beams of sword light shot out, and the dark purple dragon shadow was reflected in his eyes. The sword aura was surging all over his body. His right hand trembled slightly, and so did the extreme sword. Faint golden ripples spread out from the sword like ripples. It was so sharp that even the air couldn't stop it. Shatter the void! A low voice came out from Gold Fragment, sword hero's mouth. It contained endless sharpness, and every word was like a top-rank sword. Then, with a wave of his right hand, the extreme edge sword brought out streaks of dazzling golden sword light that covered the surrounding void. Then, as the extreme edge sword pierced into the sky, hundreds of streaks of dazzling golden sword light gathered into one in the blink of an eye. The golden sword light became dim, but its power increased by 100-fold. In an instant, everyone saw a dim golden sword light that was dozens of feet long, piercing through the sky, as if it was going to tear the void apart, heading straight for the dark purple dragon shadow that was swooping down. This dim golden sword radiance immediately made people feel as if a sharp edge was approaching them, and a chill invaded their bodies, causing them to shudder. Mountains crumbled, and the earth cracked. The mad dragon hegemony collided with the shattered void. Heaven and earth lost their color. Everyone had no choice but to close their eyes. Their bodies trembled from the impact of the terrifying sharpness and pressure. They trembled from the bottom of their hearts. Their blood and chi surged, and their bones almost shattered. They had no choice but to forcefully channel their sword chi and strengthen the power of their protective sword chi to resist the power of the impact. Under the impact of the power of the impact, the protective sword chi of the swordsmen let out creaking sounds and shattered one after another. Screams rang out. Many of the swordsmen at the front line were thrown back by the impact of the impact because their protective sword chi had been broken. They spat out blood and were already injured. Only a few of the more powerful Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen, or Sea of Qi Realm swordsmen, such as Chu Mu, were able to withstand the impact. However, their protective sword Qi was also on the verge of shattering. Fortunately, the power of the impact did not last for long. After 3 breaths, it disappeared completely, leaving only gusts of wind blowing in their faces. The golden and dark purple colors were like clouds in midair, sweeping for thousands of meters. In the sky, there were rolling sounds that sounded like thunder. Threads of light spread out in the air like cracks, and each of them contained a terrifying power that made people tremble in fear. Qian Fenghan, you have won the battle today. The treasure is yours. I will ask for your guidance in the future. The wild dragon sword hero in the sky looked at the hole in his sleeve and laughed loudly. He did not seem to be upset by the loss. Instead, after he said those words, a pair of sword chi wings appeared on his back. He suddenly flapped his wings and flew into the sky. With a turn, he quickly flew into the distance. The gold fragment, sword hero's body, was unharmed. He had a faint smile on his face. A pair of sword chi wings also appeared on his back. With a turn, he flew into the sky and quickly flew in another direction. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a small black dot and disappeared. The battle between the gold fragment sword hero and the wild dragon sword hero ended with the gold fragment sword hero winning. Soon after, the Chi High Realm swordsmen in the sky all flapped their sword chi wings and left the sky above the White Rock Valley. They wanted to quickly go back to train and understand what they had seen today. Soon, the swordsmen below also left. After a while, there were only a few hundred swordsmen left. Chu Mu was also among the few hundred swordsmen. Not only did he not have the slightest intention of leaving, he did not even stand up. He maintained his original sitting position and did not move at all. His eyes were closed as if he was in a deep sleep. Chu Mu was thinking and trying to understand. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind like lightning. The battle between the gold fragment sword hero and the wild dragon sword hero was also replaying in his mind. The details were even slowed down by 10 times so that Chu Mu could see it more clearly. The few hundred swordsmen all scattered and went in different directions. However, there were still some people who stayed. For example, the disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect. There were more than 10 of them. Every one of them was at least at the Qi transforming Deshang's sword Qi level. Half of them were at the peak of the Qi transforming realm, and 2 of them were even at the peak of the Qi transforming realm. The gazes of the disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect all landed on Chu Mu. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. They all pulled out their swords. Sword Qi surged violently as they swore to kill Chu Mu. Kill! One of the peak of the Qi transforming realm swordsmen shouted. He waved the long sword in his hand, and a stream of Xiantian sword Qi, containing the power of conception, slashed out, leaving a faint trace in the air. Kill! The other inner disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect also waved their swords and slashed out streams of Xiantian sword Qi. The streams of Xiantian sword Qi all contain the power of conception. They all slashed out in a straight line towards Chu Mu, as if they wanted to cut Chu Mu into pieces. Some of the swordsmen who had not left stopped and looked over. Suddenly, their expressions froze for a moment, then they smiled. The streams of sword Qi suddenly missed their target and slashed at the edge of the valley, leaving a trail of dust in the air. The disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect were all stunned. Then their expressions changed drastically. Chu Mu's figure appeared beside one of them. He unsheathed his rapid sky sword and stabbed out. This sword attack did not seem to be made of smoke or clouds. It was light and agile, extremely agile and soundless. It was impossible to guard against. That Qi transforming realm disciple of the Mo Luo sword sect did not notice it at all. Only when the tip of the sword was about to touch his body did he finally react. His expression changed drastically as he hurriedly retreated and strengthened his protective sword Qi. He then waved his sword and counterattacked. This sword attack was so powerful that it seemed like he wanted to die together with Yi Qin. Half of Chu Mu's face was covered by his long hair, and only one of his eyes could be seen. It shone with a cold light, but he did not dodge. Instead, he continued to stab out with his sword, but the speed of his sword had increased by 3 times. Like a hot knife through butter, the Mo Luo sword sect disciples' strengthened protective sword Qi was like nothing. The sword attack broke through the protective sword Qi and pierced through the disciple's neck before his sword could reach Yi Qin. Chu Mu's body flashed and appeared beside another disciple of the Mo Luo sword sect. He also stabbed out with his sword. In an instant, this sword attack took the life of another disciple. The sword attack was a sure kill. The surrounding swordsmen could not help but tremble as their hair stood on end. They only felt a chill on their necks and a slight pain, as if they had been pierced through by a sharp sword. Chu Mu's body seemed to have become weightless as he moved with the wind. Every sword attack was silent and unpredictable. Even though they knew that Chu Mu's sword would stab towards their necks, the disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect could not block or dodge. They could only watch as the sword light pierced through their necks and took away their lives. 10 breaths later, 10 disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect had their necks pierced through and died. Stop! After a few more breaths, only 2 disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect, who were at the peak of the Qi transforming realm, were left. Do you want to become the mortal enemy of the Mo Luo sword sect? It's not too late to stop now. We will not report this to the sect. What answered them was Chu Mu's void speed sword. At this moment, Chu Mu had completely forgotten about the outside world. He was immersed in his own comprehension. Every time he attacked, it was an attempt to verify whether his comprehension was correct. Run. After the 2 peak Qi, transforming peak swordsmen from Mo Luo sword sect blocked Chu Mu's sword together. They already knew that this person wanted to kill them all. However, they felt that they were not his match, so they understood each other's intentions after looking at each other. In an instant, the 2 of them split up and used their movement techniques to escape in a panic. Without any hesitation, Chu Mu chased after one of them. He raised his sword, and the void speed sword repelled the air. The sword was extremely fast, and the crowd only saw a flash of sword light. Immediately after, the last 2 disciples of the Mo Luo sword sect trembled and continued to run forward. Blood spurted out from his neck like an arrow. After running for a dozen or so meters, he fell forward. His body twitched a few times before he stopped moving. Chu Mu's body moved again, and he quickly chased after the other disciple. At this time, the disciple had already run a few hundred meters away. He felt something on his back, and when he looked back, he was scared out of his wits. Without caring about anything else, he struck his chest with his palm, causing a mouthful of blood to spurt out. This blood turned into a bloody mist that spread throughout his body. His face was as pale as paper, and his body trembled violently. After 3 breaths, the bloody mist covered his entire body, and he turned into a bloody light that shot forward at high speed. His speed suddenly increased by several times. Chu Mu seemed to know that he could not catch up, but he did not want to let his opponent escape. Instinctively, he took out his dark red dagger and threw it out. The dark red light pierced through the air and arrived in an instant. Its speed was unbelievable, and it directly pierced through the disciple's body. The bloody light around his body shattered in an instant, and his entire body flew a few hundred meters forward before collapsing to the ground. The blood on his body had already dried up, and only a withered and weathered body was left behind. Killing 1 person in a breath, no one was left alive under the sword. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 382. Logically speaking, the dominator of 6 realms should be celebrating the appearance of the second leader, but he has been in a terrible state recently. It is a bit difficult to update twice a day. However, the dominator of 6 realms will adjust as soon as possible. What kind of technique is this? It can actually suck a person's blood dry. Does this person cultivate some kind of evil secret technique? Blood Sword Tower. Apart from the people of Blood Sword Tower, who else would cultivate such an evil sword chi secret technique? Damn it. Wasn't Blood Sword Tower destroyed by the Great Kuin Sword Mansion and the 4 sword sects? Even the remnants of the Blood Sword Tower were all hunted down and killed. How can there still be someone who cultivates such an evil sword energy secret technique? It's inevitable that some escaped. Or did this person obtain the evil sword chi secret technique from the remnants of Blood Sword Tower and cultivate it? Regardless, the reappearance of such an evil sword chi secret technique is not a good thing for the swordsman. We should spread the news. It would be best if the great Kuin sword mansion and the 4 sword sects know so that they can send out their elite disciples to kill this person. Speaking of which, we only need to inform the Moro sword sect of this. The suspected evil sword Chi secret technique of Blood Sword Tower and the crime of killing a dozen inner sect disciples are enough for the Moro sword sect to put this person on their kill list. Chu Mu did not know that the dark red sword he threw out would lead to so many imaginations and unnecessary implications. At this moment, he was walking on the path to the Chaos Demon Plains. He was comprehending as he walked, multitasking. The sword technique he used to kill the dozen inner sect disciples of the Moro sword sect was not an ancient sword technique. It was only an application of basic sword techniques. Chu Mu's basic sword technique attainments were unfathomable. He had defeated the Sword Palace Inner Palace Sword Technique King of the previous generation and obtained the crown. It was a supreme honor. Even the Inner Palace elders' sword technique attainments were inferior to Chu Mu's. Even so, if one wanted to use basic sword techniques to fight swordsmen, they would not be able to do it unless it was under special circumstances. However, today, Chu Mu had used basic sword techniques to fight against a dozen inner sect disciples of the Moro sword sect. This was not something that those swordsmen who had not comprehended sword intent and only cultivated ordinary sword chi techniques could compare with. The reason why Chu Mu was able to kill over a dozen Mo Luo sword sect inner sect disciples with a basic sword technique was because Chu Mu used sword aura. Watching the battle between the shattering gold sword hero and the wild dragon sword hero, Chu Mu comprehended the application of sword force. Its sword chi of the sword mansion. He could be used every time he used a sword chi. The sword sect. Chu Mu. Was sword, was martial. Was Chu sword, was sword is sword, is. Sword is sword. Sword in terms of sword technique attainments. The two of them were indeed incomparably profound. Even Huangfu Songyuabak then could not match them. However, there was still a gap between them and Chu Mu. However, in terms of the application of sword force, Chu Mu couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. Luckily, Chu Mu was lucky enough to be able to witness this battle. It allowed him to take a step forward on the path of sword force. Otherwise, he would have to wait until he reached the late Qi High realm or even the peak Qi High realm before he would notice this. Chu Mu was also glad that he made the right decision to leave the sword mansion to train. Even if he could not gain anything in the future, just the application of sword chi was enough for him to benefit a lot. Condensing 1% of sword chi into the sword will increase the power of the sword by several times. Even if I don't use any ancient sword techniques, I can still easily kill a chi transformation peak sword artist. But this power is not enough. Chu Mu could not help but think of the last 2 disciples of the Moro sword sect. They were both at the peak of chi transformation, peak sword chi. Chu Mu could not kill them with a single sword strike. If it weren't for the fact that the 2 of them had thoughts of retreating due to the deaths of their junior brothers and Chu Mu's terror, if they had decided to fight Chu Mu to the death, without using the ancient sword technique, it would have been extremely difficult to kill the 2 of them with just 1% of the sword aura. Chu Mu wasn't satisfied with killing a swordsman whose cultivation wasn't as high as his in one strike, because even if he didn't use sword force, he could still easily do it. Since that was the case, what was the point of comprehending this 1% of sword force? Chu Mu felt that it should not be like this. Perhaps his comprehension was not enough, which was why he felt it was useless. What was missing in all of this? Could it be that the sword chi is not enough? Chu Mu immediately rejected this idea. If he used the space-shattering sword technique, he would use up all of his sword chi. With one sword strike, he would use up more than half of his essence, chi, and spirit. With his essence, chi, and spirit, he could only barely use 2 sword strikes. But if it was just 1% of sword chi, the consumption of his essence, Qi and spirit was almost negligible. Coupled with the natural recovery of his essence, Qi and spirit, as long as he did not continuously use 1% of sword Qi too many times, it would not cause too much of a burden on him. Thinking of this, Chu Mu stopped and closed his eyes. The battle between the gold-shattering sword hero and the wild dragon sword hero appeared in his mind again. The swords, which had been slowed down by dozens of times, appeared clearly again. Chu Mu's eyelids trembled slightly. The figures of the gold-shattering sword hero and the wild dragon sword hero seemed to have disappeared in his mind. Only the two swords were left clashing and infinitely magnified. Both swords contained sword Qi. 1% of sword Qi was the best ratio. In addition, Chu Mu also found that there were other forces in that 1% of sword Qi. Sword Qi and conception. Yes, sword Qi and conception were still indispensable factors for an excellent swordsman. They were important components of strength. If it was only 1% of sword Qi, it could indeed increase the power of the sword by several times. But it would still be difficult to be invincible among the same level. Only by integrating other forces and combining all of the forces in one's body could the power of each sword strike be increased to the maximum. Thinking of this, Chu Mu's eyes were still closed, but his right hand still pulled out the space-shattering sword and stabbed out. Tian Yuan, sword Qi flowed, and the conception of destruction spread out. A dark golden luster flowed on the space-shattering sword. Then the 1% of sword Qi also flowed and covered the sword. The sword suddenly became heavy, as if it was being pressed down by 1,000-pound rock. But Chu Mu held it firmly, and the sword did not tremble in the slightest. When the sword struck out, it left a clear vacuum mark in the air. It spread out for several meters and hit a boulder on the side of the road. The boulder was pierced through like tofu. Sheathing the sword, Chu Mu opened his eyes and looked at the boulder. Staring at the hole in the boulder, he frowned slightly. The direction is correct, but the method seems to be wrong. There were fine cracks on the edge of the hole in the boulder. This meant that the power in the sword was not condensed enough. When it hit the boulder, some of the power scattered, causing the fine cracks to appear. Since the method was wrong, he had to change it. Chu Mu tried a few more times, but it was still the same. There was no improvement. He closed his eyes again and immersed himself in the image of the battle between the two great swordsmen in his mind. This time, the comprehension lasted for an hour, but Chu Mu didn't fully concentrate. Instead, he split his mind into two and paid attention to the outside world. As long as there was any movement, he would immediately know and make the correct response. This road was very small and remote, so there were very few people walking on it. After an hour, Chu Mu was the only one. Chu Mu's eyes were still closed. He pulled out the speed sky sword again and stabbed at the boulder a few meters away. It was still the Tian Yuan sword Qi, the ripping concept, and 1% of the sword aura in the sword. However, this sword was somewhat different from before. The three different powers seemed to have completely merged into one and were extremely condensed. As the sword stabbed out, the vacuum mark appeared again, and the boulder was pierced through like tofu. The edge of the hole was intact, which was enough to show that the sword had achieved the result that Chu Mu wanted. Sure enough, sword Qi flows on the sword in a flowing manner. Firstly, it can make the sword more flexible, and secondly, it can reduce the consumption of sword Qi. Although the concept power mixed with the sword Qi cannot reduce the consumption of the concept power, it can make the concept power and the sword Qi more compatible. In the end, the sword aura will condense into a line and gather on the sword, carrying the sword Qi and the concept power. In this way, the three different powers will merge into one and achieve true condensation. Chu Mu muttered to himself as he opened his eyes and stared at the hole in the boulder. A sliver of satisfaction flashed through his eyes. Fortunately, his comprehension ability was monstrous, and his soul strength was 10 times that of an ordinary swordsman. As a result, he was able to accurately use 1% of the sword aura after a few attempts. If it were any other swordsman, Even if they knew this method, it would probably take them months, years, or even longer to accurately use 1% of the sword aura. After all, once a swordsman grasped the sword aura, they would use their full strength every time they used it. It seemed to be an instinct, so swordsmen would use it as a trump card. Only swordsmen with extraordinary talent who had comprehended the mysteries of the sword aura or received guidance from an expert could comprehend it and do it. However, there were very few people like Chumu who could comprehend it and do it in an extremely short amount of time. After being able to freely use 1% of the sword aura, wanting to successfully condense the sword chi, the concept power, and the sword aura into one was another difficult problem. It would still require a lot of time to accomplish it. As for Chumu, after watching the battle between the two sword masters, he had comprehended and done it after a few hours of comprehension. If news of this were to spread, who knew what kind of shock it would cause in the world of swordsmen? However, it's still not enough. I feel like I can condense it even more, Chumu said to himself as he sheathed his sword. If these words were heard by other swordsmen, perhaps they would all spit blood from anger. Chumu had easily done something they couldn't even do with their lives on the line. Yet, after doing it, he still felt it wasn't enough and needed to be strengthened. Could it be that comparing oneself to others would only make one angry? It was not something that could be done in a short amount of time if he continued to strengthen it. Chumu continued on his journey. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 383. Time passed by like sand flowing through one's fingers. Unknowingly, another month had passed. The waning moon hung high in the sky. Circles of white light seemed to repel the surrounding dark clouds, forming a circular white space. The surrounding dark clouds seemed to be covered with a layer of silver gauze. The earth was gloomy and the night was dark. The waning moon's light was weak, adding a bit of mystery and desolation to the earth in the middle of the night. In the small forest, a wisp of sword light instantly bloomed in the deep night sky, and it emanated a dark golden sheen that was dazzling and resplendent. Everywhere it passed, the deep night sky was torn apart, and there were even numerous sword lights of various colors that swept out horizontally and vertically while sword chi surged. Under the mood of looking up at the moon and looking down at home, there was a massacre. Muffled shouts of kill could be heard intermittently, and there were also screams that were suddenly cut off intermittently. There were also sharp, whistling sounds of swords moving through the air, weaving a march of slaughter in this deep night. The dark red sword light pierced through the air and disappeared into the night in a flash. After 20 breaths, the sword light completely disappeared. The dark golden sword light also returned. After a series of rustling sounds, light footsteps were heard. A figure walked out from the dark night of the little forest. His body was suddenly covered with a layer of faint white. Raising his head to look at the white waning moon in the sky, Chumu's eyes flashed with deep longing before disappearing into nothingness. His eyes became even clearer and firmer, sparkling and reflecting the waning moon's light, as if he wanted to see through the dark clouds in the sky. The fifth batch. These people really don't know what's good for them. Thinking to himself, Chumu took a step forward again, staring at the faint white brilliance of the waning moon. He walked forward on a remote path. Since watching the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero a month ago, Chumu had killed more than 10 inner disciples of the Moro Sword sect. 5 days later, he encountered his first assassination attempt. The ambushers were not disciples of the Moro Sword sect, but a group of loose swordsmen or chi transformation stage swordsmen from some other sect. There were more than a dozen of them, and they were lying in ambush on the side of the road. Unfortunately, they didn't know that Chumu's soul power was 10 times stronger than an ordinary sword practitioner's. His 5 senses were also many times stronger. Even the slightest unusual fluctuation would be sensed by him. As a result, not only did the ambush of the dozen or so chi transformation sword practitioners fail, they were all killed by Chu Mu in a dozen breaths of time. Since he wants to kill me, I will not show any mercy when I draw my sword. The second ambush was from the Moro sword sect. There were 5 inner sect disciples who were at the peak of the perfected chi transformation realm. Each of them possessed extraordinary strength, and their strength was close to that of the great Kuin sword mansion's bronze sword roll. Unfortunately, they were still unable to resist Chu Mu's sword. In just a short span of 10 breaths, which was an average of 1 person every 2 breaths, they all died to Chu Mu's sword. 4 died to the void speed sword, and 1 died to the dark red dagger. Their blood was sucked dry, so naturally, everything they carried on them became Chu Mu's spoils of war. Unfortunately, they did not have a treasure like a spatial bracelet. The third ambush was from over 20 chi transformation realm swordsmen. They seemed to be from different sects, but they all died to Chu Mu's sword in the end. Chu Mu also learned why he was ambushed. It was because of the dark red dagger. The dark red dagger could suck a person's blood dry. It did seem like some kind of evil sword chi or secret technique. It was very easy for people to associate it with the blood sword tower that had run amok earlier. The fourth ambush was from the Moro sword sect. It was led by a famous inner court disciple and was followed by 10 inner court disciples at the peak of the chi transformation realm. That battle took Chu Mu a bit more effort to kill them all. The fifth ambush was just now. Not only were there disciples from the Moro sword sect, but there were also chi transformation realm swordsmen from other sections. Altogether, there were over 30 of them. Using the void speed sword and the dark red dagger together, it took Chu Mu a bit of time to kill them all without suffering any injuries. The current Chu Mu had already reached a level where he could be said to be invincible under the Chi Si. Which Chi transformation realm swordsman could grasp Desheng's peak sword Chi? Which Chi transformation realm swordsman could comprehend and grasp 1% of the sword Chi? And which Chi transformation realm swordsman could comprehend 50% of the powerful, mutated concept while in the Chi transformation realm? With all these factors combined, it created Chu Mu's terrifying strength. Even some of the stronger Chi Si swordsmen were no match for Chu Mu. The saying that he was invincible under the Chi Si realm was not nonsense. Looks like I should try not to use the dark red dagger in front of people. Once I use it, I will most likely have to kill people to prevent rumors from spreading. Chu Mu thought to himself as he walked. Even he felt that the dark red dagger was definitely not something good, let alone other people. However, Chu Mu was very curious about the secret of the dark red dagger. He wanted to unravel the secrets within and see where the Lin family's heirloom came from. He also wanted to see how it could help him. There might be some danger, but the world of swordsmen was filled with danger. If he gave up because he was uncertain about the dangers, his sharpness would be damaged, and he would not be able to go far on the path of the sword. Once the sword was drawn, there would be no regrets. After walking for a while, Chu Mu stopped and sat down cross-legged on the side of the road to rest. After walking for 2 months, his shoes were already worn out. Right now, Chu Mu was barefoot. His feet stepped on the ground, allowing him to constantly connect to the chi of the earth. It was as if he had comprehended something, but also as if he had not. He closed his eyes and meditated. One part of his mind was paying attention to the outside world, and the other part was controlling the pure heaven desolate chi from the ancient heaven desolate pellet to refine all the meridians in his body. Although the meridians were thin, they were many. After a month of refining, Chu Mu had only completed half of his meridians. However, he had consumed 1.5 ancient heaven desolate pellets. According to this situation, it would take another month and 1.5 ancient heaven desolate pellets to complete the refining. The waning moon in the sky slowly moved. Unknowingly, it had already set in the west. In the east, A ray of golden-red light shone through the sky. After a while, it spread out and a huge fireball like red sun rose into the sky, illuminating the horizon. The sun rose and the moon set. A new day had arrived. The warm light sprinkled on the ground and spread over Chu Mu's body. It was as if he had put on a layer of red veil. Chu Mu's eyelids slightly trembled. He slowly opened his eyes, which were crystal clear. He slightly opened his mouth and gently breathed out. A cloud of white, turbid chi was suddenly exhaled. It condensed into a sword and shot out a few meters away. It bombarded the ground and created a small hole. Exhaling like a sword, it was rumored that a powerful sword artist's breath contained a great amount of power. It could even pierce through a mountain. It was extremely terrifying. Looking at the small hole a few meters away, Chu Mu suddenly thought that if an Origin Realm sword artist's breath was like a sword, the power would be unimaginable. Perhaps it could easily kill a Chi transforming realm or even a Chi high realm sword artist. After refining his meridians for an entire night and practicing the 9 rotation of Heaven Yuan, Chu Mu was not practicing the 9 rotation of Heaven Yuan to increase his power. Instead, he was practicing the 9 rotation of Heaven Yuan to the 9th rotation. In his mind, if he could practice the 9 rotation of Heaven Yuan to the 9th rotation and complete the Sky Baron Sword Body, he would be able to break through to the Chi High realm and directly practice the Sky Baron Sword Arts. This would save him the trouble of finding a new sword chi art, but he did not know if he could do it. Thinking about this, Chu Mu stood up and looked at the sun in the east. His body was full of vitality, and he was about to continue walking. A sharp sound of wind breaking came, followed by a few shouts. Chu Mu immediately turned his head to look to the left. He thought it was the 6th wave of people trying to kill him, but it was not. It was a dozen swordsmen wearing red robes chasing after an old man and a young man. The old man and the young man's faces were pale and filled with fear. Grief, anger, helplessness, and all kinds of emotions were present in their eyes. The old man's sword chi had obviously reached the Chi High realm, but it seemed like he was heavily injured, causing his sword chi to be very obscure. This caused him to be unable to use more than 10% of his strength. In addition, he had to take care of the young man. Otherwise, he would not be chased by the dozen swordsmen who were only at the Chi transforming realm, Deshang. As for the young man's sword chi, he was only half a step away from the Chi transforming realm. He was being dragged by the old man. Otherwise, with his speed, the dozen swordsmen would have already caught up with him. Chu Mu only took a glance and then withdrew his gaze. In the world of swordsmen, all kinds of things often happened. Being chased or being chased, killing or being killed, etc. He was not a person with a strong sense of justice. He would not cause unnecessary trouble because of an unclear pursuit. Old fogey, I advise you to obediently hand over that treasure. Otherwise, we'll make your grandson and grandson beg for death. One of the dozen red-clothed men who were chasing after the old man and the young man threatened in a vicious voice. A glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes, and he abruptly stopped. "The O clan," he muttered in a low voice. His mind unconsciously recalled the words of the deacon of the Heavenly Artifact Pavilion on the 5th floor of the Earth Wasteland building. In just a breath's time, Chu Mu made a decision. His body moved as light as a feather, as if he was weightless. He then charged at an incomparably fast speed toward the dozen swordsmen who were dozens of meters away. He unsheathed the void sword, and a faint golden sword light pierced through the air. The old man and the young man who were fleeing for their lives only felt a figure pass by at high speed. When they unconsciously turned their heads to look, their eyes reflected the dozen or so thin, faint golden sword lights flashing through the air. The dozen or so swordsmen who were chasing after them all covered their throats with their hands, their eyes wide open, and fell to the ground with unwillingness. Chu Mu indifferently glanced at the dozen or so swordsmen and then sheathed his sword. From ignoring them to deciding to attack, it had only taken a breath's time. Intuition told Chu Mu that killing these dozen or so swordsmen would definitely cause him some trouble. But since he had already drawn his sword, he should have no regrets. No matter what kind of trouble it was, the sword in his hand would bear it all. Thinking of this, Chu Mu slowly turned around to look at the old man and young man who were being chased in an incomparably sorry state. The old man and young man opened their eyes wide and stared with incomparably complicated expressions at Chu Mu, this person who looked extremely down and out. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 384. Are you too from the O clan of the border city? Chu Mu stared at the old man and the young man and asked indifferently. The complexions of the old man and the young man suddenly changed. They subconsciously retreated. The sword energy in the old man's body fluctuated violently. It seemed as if he was about to fight for his life. Then it was unknown what he thought. His complexion became full of helplessness as he nodded. Yes, rumor has it that the O clan has a strange technique called heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique. Is this true or false? Chu Mu asked the second question. The complexion of the old man and the young man changed again. The complexion of the handsome youth became ashen. He gnashed his teeth as he stared at Chu Mu. So what if it is true or false? My O clan's unique technique will never be handed over to demons and monsters like you. He looked as if he wished to eat Chu Mu's flesh and drink his blood. The old man quickly protected the young man behind him. He was afraid that Chu Mu would suddenly attack and behead the young man. He had seen Chu Mu's sword attack a moment ago. It was very frightening. Even if he was in his peak condition, he would still be afraid. Not to mention that he was seriously injured. He couldn't even display 10% of his strength. Does the O clan still have a great swordsmith? Chu Mu's complexion slightly changed. Then he returned to normal and asked the third question. This time, the old man and the young man were confused. This person had saved them. However, they were very vigilant. Who knew if this person was like those people who were coveting their O clan's unique technique? Therefore, they had spoken ill of Chu Mu. Now that she heard Chu Mu's question, she was instantly at a loss. It seemed that the reason this person saved the grandfather and grandson duo wasn't to forcefully seize the O family's family heirloom technique, the heavenly shaking fusion sword forging technique. Only the two of us are left in the O clan. I believe that I have the ability to become a great swordsmith master. However, I haven't been able to step into the threshold of a great swordsmith. The old man pondered for a while before answering Chu Mu. I see. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with disappointment. Previously, when he was in the Heavenly Artifact Pavilion on the 5th floor of the Earth Wasteland building in the border city, he had heard from the deacon that the O clan's heaven-shaking fusion sword forging technique was a top-notch technique. The swords forged by this technique were often superior to other swords of the same level. It was truly extraordinary. If a grandmaster could forge the sky desolate sword with the sky-shaking essence sword forging technique, the sky desolate sword would definitely be better. Since there was no result, Chu Mu did not have the intention to continue staying. He turned around and was about to leave. It seemed that he could only find other sword forging grandmasters and ask them to help forge the desolate sky sword. Perhaps it was not as good as the effect of the sky-shaking sword fusion, but it could still reach the standard of the Sky Wasteland Sword Manual. The old man and the young man were stunned once again. Chu Mu actually turned around and left without the slightest intention of asking for repayment. How could they, who had drifted in the desolate city for many years and experienced the fickleness of human nature, not be shocked? The grandson and grandson looked at each other. Their eyes suddenly became firm, as if they had reached a consensus at the same time. "Benefactor, please wait a moment," the old man quickly said. "What's the matter?" Chu Mu paused his footsteps and turned around to look. Benefactor saved the lives of us grandfather and grandson. This old man should thank you. The old man was startled at first. Then he said, "Then, how do you want to thank me?" Chu Mu indifferently asked. The purpose of his attack was only a glimmer of hope. He wanted to see if there was a sword-forging grandmaster among these two people who had mastered the sky-shaking essence sword-forging technique. However, the result was that there was no such sword-forging grandmaster. Since there was no such sword-forging grandmaster, Chu Mu also felt that there was no need to continue staying. For him, the best way to thank them was to forge the sky desolate sword. The old man revealed an embarrassed look. Yes, how should I thank him? Could it be that I have to offer the O clan's unique skill, the sky-shaking essence sword-forging technique? Apart from this, the grandfather and grandson did not have any precious treasures that they could use to thank Chu Mu for saving their lives. Benefactor, since you saved us grandfather and grandson, why don't you be a good person until the end? The young man quickly said. Chu Mu slightly shook his head, turned around, and once again strode away. His purpose of saving them was very clear. Since there was no result, the life and death of the grandfather and grandson had nothing to do with him. As for obtaining the sky-shaking essence, sword-forging technique from the old man and comprehending it himself, Chu Mu had thought about it. However, he was currently comprehending the sword power concept and so on. Cultivating the sky, desolate, sword body had already occupied all his time. He really could not divert his attention. Otherwise, it would delay his progress. There were specializations in each field. Chu Mu did not intend to become a sword-forging grandmaster. It was you who killed dozens of my Moro sword sect's inner disciples? A young swordsman stood in front of Chu Mu. He held his sword and pointed it at Chu Mu. The sharp aura pressured from afar. The surrounding 30 meters was filled with a desolate, killing intent. The spirit energy of heaven and earth seemed to be driven and oppressed. Chi-si. Chu Mu indifferently spat out these two words. The opponent's aura did not make him feel oppressed. Ha 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 ha, at least you have some eyesight. The black-robed young swordsman opposite him laughed a few times. His expression was arrogant. His gaze was as if Chu Mu was an ant that could be killed by his sword. You do have some ability. You were able to kill dozens of my sect's inner disciples. You were even able to kill a disciple on the bronze sword ranking. No wonder you are one of the core disciples of the sect. Chi-si realm swordsmen were disciples of the great Kuan sword house, but in the 4 major sword sects they were core disciples. Chu Mu also did not expect that killing him would be one of the core disciples of the Moro sword sect. I will give you a chance. Obediently surrender and follow me back to the sect to await your punishment. The core disciple of the Moro sword sect pointed his sword at Chu Mu and said in high spirits. It was not that he did not want to kill Chu Mu, but if he captured Chu Mu alive and brought him back to the Moro sword sect, the reward for the mission would be even better. You think too highly of yourself. Chu Mu replied calmly. This young swordsman was only a Chi-si realm swordsman. If it was in the past, Chu Mu would have been very cautious. But now, he only wanted Chu Mu to be serious. The speed sky sword was unsheathed. The sword turned into a cold star and pierced through the sky towards the core disciple of the Moro sword sect. This sword contained the sky origin sword chi, the power of the concept of ripping, and also 1% of the sword force. It was extremely fast and powerful like lightning. The core disciple of the Moro sword sect was furious. He waved his sword, and the sword chi within it activated the chi of heaven and earth. The sword light pierced through the sky and covered half of Chu Mu's body. It was going to cut Chu Mu in half. The Chi-si realm could activate the chi of heaven and earth to defend against the enemy. Chu Mu was attacked by this sword and immediately felt half of his body go numb. Even the protective sword chi and the invisible protective sword chi could not defend against it. The sword chi was activated and half of his body was restored to normal. The speed of the sword attack was even faster. Chu Mu's body flashed and created many illusions. The core disciple of the Moro sword sect had no choice but to change his sword attack. He once again activated the chi of heaven and earth and gathered it on the sword. The sword attack was like a crescent moon and was extremely sharp. It cut through the air and attacked Chu Mu. The killing intent and chi mixed together and attacked Chu Mu, shattering all of the illusions. Chu Mu's real body appeared on the left side of the core disciple of the Moro sword sect. His sword attack was still the same. This sword attack made the core disciple of the Moro sword sect feel threatened. Once he was hit, he was afraid that his protective sword chi would not be able to defend against it and would be broken in an instant. He also finally knew why this person was listed as one of the core disciple missions, even though he was only at the peak of the chi transforming realm. It was because this person had the power to threaten a chi sea realm swordsman. The crescent moon missed, cutting through the air and hitting a boulder more than 10 meters away. With a cracking sound, the boulder was as fragile as tofu and was cut open in an instant. The crescent moon's aftershock did not dissipate and continued to rush forward until it was more than 100 meters away. With a ding sound, the top-rank sword in the Moro sword sect core disciple's hand started to vibrate uncontrollably. Chu Mu's sword attack had been infused with the stone-shaking force at the last moment. The tip of the sword had touched the body of the core disciple's sword. Not only did it destroy the sword chi and mental state that covered the sword, it also left a broken mark on the hard body of the sword. The core disciple's face changed, and he quickly backed off. He never thought that a Chi Sea Realm swordsman like him would be defeated by a Chi transforming realm swordsman. Just as he was about to reorganize his counterattack, he suddenly saw hundreds of fragments of starlight appear in front of him. They slowly diffused into the surroundings and enveloped him. That damned Chi transformation swordsman seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Even that terrifying sword of his had disappeared. Why were these broken stars so dazzling? They almost made people lose themselves in them. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, the Moro sword sect core disciple's face suddenly changed. His face turned pale as the sword chi in his body started to move crazily. He connected with the heaven and earth spirit chi in the outside world and gathered it on his sword. He waved his sword, and it was like a tidal wave, creating a loud sound. The hundreds of broken stars were shaking under the impact of this tidal wave of sword chi. They dimmed and looked like they could be destroyed at any time. A dim light suddenly appeared. The huge tidal wave of sword chi could not stop it at all. It was torn apart in an instant, and a sword stabbed out silently. All of a sudden, the tidal wave of sword chi stopped and slowly disappeared. The hundreds of broken stars also disappeared. The core disciple of the Moro sword sect covered his throat. Streams of blood flowed out from between his fingers. His eyes stared straight ahead, filled with disbelief. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. His body slowly fell backwards, and with a bang, a lot of dust and smoke filled the air. Chu Mu looked on calmly. The rapid sky sword drew out a flower, and the blood on the tip of the sword withered like a blooming flower. He put the rapid sky sword back into its scabbard. Even though he had only trained the first move of the Broken Star sword art, the Broken Star Shine, to the initial level, and it was not that powerful, it could confuse the opponent. Even though it was just a moment of confusion, it was enough for Chu Mu to use his ultimate move. The ultimate move was not a sword movement. It was just the power of the sword chi and the stone shaking power. The power of this move had already exceeded the power of a mortal realm ancient sword art. After putting away the upper rank sword of the Chi High Realm warrior and taking off the lower rank space bracelet from his wrist, Chu Mu turned around and looked at a tree not far away. He then turned around and left. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 385. The Chaos Demon Plane was not under the jurisdiction of any of the dynasties. If one looked at the map, one could see that the 10 dynasties of the Eastern Sword Domain were to the right, while the Chaos Demon Plane was to the left. A part of it was in the Eastern Sword Domain, and another part was in the eastern corner of the Central Sword Domain, connected to the 100,000 Monster Mountain of the Central Sword Domain. It could also be said that the demonic Chaos Plains was just a corner of the 100,000 Monster Mountains. Even so, the demonic Chaos Plains still traversed the entire Eastern Sword region and almost touched the borders of the 10 dynasties. There were countless powerful monsters living in the plains, and even a Chi High Realm sword artist would not dare to go too deep into the plains. After 3 months, Chumu finally walked from the Black Dragon Mountain to the Chaos Demon Plain, and officially stepped into the Chaos Demon Plane. Before taking the first step, he could still feel that the spirit chi was relatively pure. After taking the first step, Chumu was startled and took another step back. After repeating this a few times, Chumu's face finally showed an expression of realization. The Chaos Demon Plane was the habitat of countless powerful monsters, and the chi here was naturally different from other places. Human swordsmen absorbed the spirit chi of heaven and earth and turned it into sword chi, while monsters absorbed the spirit chi of heaven and earth and turned it into monster power. When there were many monsters, the monster power would leak out uncontrollably and become monster chi in the air, coexisting with the spirit chi of heaven and earth, causing the spirit chi of heaven and earth to become more heterogeneous. Although after 3 months, his sword chi cultivation did not increase at all, but he had gained a lot along the way. The 4th part of the Sky Desolate sword body, the meridian part, had been completed. It took a total of 2 months and 3 ancient Sky Desolate pills, and there were still 15 pills left, and 3 parts of the Sky Desolate sword body had not been completed. Muscles, skin, hair. Maybe after the 15 ancient Sky Desolate pills are used up, the Sky Desolate sword body will also be close to completion. Chumu thought to himself. The most important thing was the application of the 1% of sword force. This was Chumu's biggest gain. It allowed his strength to increase a lot without increasing his cultivation level. Especially after he mastered it, he even integrated the trembling stone force into it, causing its power to increase again. A month ago, Chumu had killed a core disciple of the Moro sword sect in a head-on manner without using any secret technique, without suffering any injuries. This was enough to prove that Chumu's strength was several times stronger than before. Within 3 months, the 9 transformations of Sky Origin will break through to the 9th transformation. By then, the characteristics of the 9 transformations of Sky Origin will be fully revealed. Step by step, Chumu walked on the ground of the Demon Chaos Plains, carefully sensing the spiritual energy fluctuations around him. There were traces of Yao Qi mixed in, making Chumu feel somewhat unaccustomed. As far as the eye could see, the Demon Chaos Plains seemed to be boundless, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to be flat and desolate. There were no trees or rocks, and it was like a desert. On this somewhat barren land, apart from Chumu, there were many other people walking side by side or on the opposite side. Not long after, a group of carriages slowly arrived. Their flags fluttered in the wind, and a large young character was written on them. They seemed to be a caravan. There's a city at the border between the Demon Chaos Plains and the Grand Kuan Dynasty, and it's called Demon Shaker City. Chumu walked forward as he recalled the information about the Demon Chaos Plains that he had looked up in the Sword Mansion. The Demon Chaos Plains was the habitat of the Yao beasts. Many years ago, there was a Yao beast riot that killed their way into the Grand Kuan Dynasty, causing the people to suffer and suffering. The royal family of the Grand Kuan Dynasty mobilized their army to fight against the invading Yao beasts, and the Grand Kuan Sword Mansion also sent out powerful swordsmen to support them. There were also many sword sects, clans, factions, and civilian swordsmen that joined in. In the end, the rioting Yao beasts were repelled. In that battle, many soldiers and swordsmen died in the Grand Kuan dynasty. Every single one of them who survived had their strength greatly improved, and they obtained many corpses and blood of Yao beasts as materials to nurture even more soldiers and swordsmen. After that, in order to prevent the Yao beasts from rioting and invading the Grand Kuan dynasty again, the royal family ordered the construction of a city at the border. The purpose was to fend off the demon chaos plane's monster riot at the front line, and to prevent the flames of war from spreading into the Grand Kuan dynasty's territory, causing the commoners to suffer and crops to be destroyed. The city was constructed under the orders of the Grand Kuan dynasty's royal family, and the city lord was naturally a capable person sent by the Grand Kuan dynasty's royal family. In the beginning, Demon Shaker City was indeed completely under the jurisdiction of the Grand Kuan dynasty's royal family. However, as time passed, Demon Shaker City was located at the border, and because of the Yao Beast riot, the area within 500 kilometers was barren and resources were extremely scarce. It was desolate and uninhabited. As the saying went, the sky was high and the emperor was far away. Coupled with the participation of the various clans and powers, as time passed, Demon Shaker City showed signs of breaking away from the jurisdiction of the Grand Kuan dynasty. Unfortunately, its overall strength was insufficient. Coupled with the fact that the appointment of the city lord had to be approved by the Grand Kuan dynasty's emperor, Demon Shaker City was still under the jurisdiction of the Grand Kuan dynasty in name. Chu Mu, who seemed to be in dire straits, didn't attract too much attention. In the demon chaos plains, all kinds of people could appear, and people like Chu Mu could be considered to be relatively ordinary. After walking for about half a day, Chu Mu finally saw the outline of a city. It stood on the flat ground like an ancient ferocious beast that was in a deep slumber, and it emitted waves of aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. Chu Mu also noticed that the color of the ground beneath his feet had changed. It gradually darkened from its original brown color to a faint, dark red color. This dark red color became darker and richer the closer it got to Demon Shaker City, and it even emitted traces of a fishy smell. After a period of time, Chu Mu finally arrived before Demon Shaker City. He stopped and looked at this enormous city that was said to have once resisted 1,000,000 rampaging demon beasts. His expression changed slightly, and a bright light flickered in his eyes. The fishy smell that emanated from the ground became even thicker, causing Chu Mu to be unable to get used to it for a moment. The walls of Demon Shaker City were 20 meters tall, and they were built from enormous square gray rocks. The originally ancient gray walls were covered in dark red mottled marks, and the dried and solidified pieces were still clearly visible after being eroded by time. As he looked at the countless dark red mottled marks, Chu Mu seemed to smell a trace of a dense smell of blood. In his days, he seemed to see countless demon beasts swarming over, and the soldiers and swordsmen of Demon Shaker City fought a bloody battle against the countless demon beasts, causing a rain of blood to rain down. According to the records, it had been 1,000 years since the construction of Demon Shaker City. In total, it had resisted more than 30 demon beast rampages in the Demon Shaker Plain. On average, there would be one demon beast rampage every 30 years. The smallest demon beast rampage involved 100,000 demon beasts, while the largest rampage involved 1,000,000 demon beasts. Every time the demon beast rampage involved a large number of swordsmen dying under the claws and fangs of the demon beasts. Similarly, the demon beasts would also die on a large scale. With Demon Shaker City as the center, the land within a radius of 100 li was completely soaked in the blood of demon beasts and swordsmen. After every great battle, the blood would spread like a lake and would gradually seep into the ground under the scorching sun. After a few times, the ground would turn into a bloody soil. It would remain dark red all year round, and would only deepen over the past 1,000 years. Every time the demonic beasts went on a rampage, in addition to causing a large number of deaths, the Demon Shaker City would also be damaged. The minor damage would be the city walls being damaged. The major damage would be the last time when 1 million demonic beasts went on a rampage, which destroyed half of the city. After every damage, no matter what, the great Kuan royal family would definitely provide funds to rebuild the city. Many scattered swordsmen among the common folk would also provide manpower to help rebuild the city. After all, after 1,000 years, Demon Shaker City's function was no longer just to defend against demon beast rampages. It also had other uses. For example, it was an indispensable place for swordsmen who entered the Demon Shaker plane to train or to make a living. Chu Mu withdrew his gaze from the city walls and walked towards the city gates of Demon Shaker City. The city gates of Demon Shaker City faced the Demon Shaker plane. The entire city gate was 10 meters tall and 8 meters wide. It was dark red in color and extremely thick. It was forged from refined steel, and there were fist-sized semicircular protrusions on it. The entire city gate was covered in crisscrossing scratches. The city gates were wide open, but there were no guards at the foot of the city gates. This was different from other cities. People constantly walked out of the city gates and entered the city gates. Basically, people could be seen coming in and out of the city gates with swords in their hands or on their backs. Every single one of them had a strong or weak sword aura emanating from their bodies. Every single one of them was a swordsman. Chu Mu also saw some strange-looking people. Some of them were bare-chested and only wore a pair of pants. Some of them had hair of several different colors. Some of them wore masks on their faces. Some of them had tattoos on their exposed skin. There were even some who only had one eye and a grin on their face. This Demon Shaker City was truly a gathering place for strange people. Raising his head to look at the top of the city gates, Xiaoqin saw another rectangular piece of steel embedded in it. 3 large scarlet words were written on it: Demon Shaker City. These 3 words were like a dragon surging out of the sea. They contained a sharp and domineering aura. It was as if an emperor had appeared in front of everyone and looked down on the world. Anyone with a weak will would be so intimidated that they would be unable to move. It was said that these 3 words were personally written by the emperor of the great Kuan royal family after the Demon Shaker City was built. There was a powerful energy protecting it, allowing this piece of steel to not be damaged by the demonic beast's rampages. On the other hand, if a person or demonic beast intentionally or unintentionally tried to destroy the steel plaque, they would be counterattacked by the energy on it. They would be killed with a single strike. One had to know that every emperor of the great Kuan royal family was also a powerful swordsman. Their bloodline was extraordinary. It was passed down from generation to generation, causing their talents to surpass ordinary people. In addition to the many treasures, resources, techniques, and secret techniques, every emperor of the great Kuan royal family would at least have the cultivation of the origin realm. Chu Mu's soul was very powerful. He easily got rid of the intimidating aura from the 3 words. He lowered his head and looked at his shabby robe that looked like a beggar's. He then walked into the city gates with large strides. I have to find an inn to stay in first. Then I will buy some suitable clothes. Muttering to himself, Chu Mu followed the crowd into the Demon Shaker City. At the same time, he was planning his next step in his mind, to be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 386. Chu Mu's first impression after entering the demon-shaking city was that it was in chaos. There weren't many shops on both sides of the street. Most of them occupied a large area. They looked neat and orderly. However, Chu Mu didn't know why he felt that it was in a mess. This was also a desolate city. However, Chu Mu felt that it was really neat and orderly. For a moment, Chu Mu had a strange feeling that he didn't know north, south, east, or west. He composed himself and looked to the left and right. He wanted to look for someone who sold books similar to the Chronicle of the Desolate Border in the desolate city. He wanted to have a deeper understanding of the demon-shaking city. Unfortunately, he didn't find anyone. He had done some research on the demon chaos plane and the demon shaking city before he had set off. However, it wasn't detailed. It was just a general idea. A group of more than 10 swordsmen wearing red robes was walking toward him. The swordsmen on the street dodged one after another wherever they passed. It seemed as if they were ordinary people who had seen a flood or a ferocious beast. Chu Mu's eyelids trembled. He followed the others and quickly dodged to the side of the street. These more than 10 swordsmen in red robes were at the level of Qi transformation, small success stage. Their sword Qi cultivation was at the level of Deshang's. Their eyebrows were vertical, and their appearance was fierce and fiendish. Chu Mu recalled the red-robed swordsman he had killed to save the old man and the young man of the Oak clan a month ago. Their attire was very similar. Sure enough, it's really troublesome, Chu Mu said inwardly. Looking at the situation before his eyes, these red-robed swordsmen must belong to a powerful force. However, he didn't regret it even if this was the case. The sword was either unsheathed or unsheathed. Moreover, he would wash up and change into a new robe. Even the old man and the young man wouldn't be able to recognize him after he tidied himself up. The people of the Red Clothed Association are getting more and more arrogant. Speak less. If they hear you, you're dead meat. Chu Mu could vaguely hear the whispers of the swordsmen beside him. Their voices were filled with fear. He wanted to continue listening, but the two swordsmen were really worried that the people from the Red Spectres Association would overhear their discussion, so they quickly shut their mouths. Chu Mu could not hear any more useful information. After the dozen or so swordsmen from the Red Coat Association walked past them, the swordsmen returned to the street and walked forward. Chu Mu did not do anything out of the ordinary. He just followed the crowd. Every single swordsman here had a ripple of sword chi. In addition, there was also an aura of blood and fire surrounding them. This meant that every single swordsman here was not a flower in a greenhouse. Every single one of them definitely had experience in life and death battles. Chu Mu focused his attention on his surroundings, hoping to hear more information about Demon Shaker City. Unfortunately, these swordsmen were only talking about their gains in the Demon Shaker City, the demon beasts they encountered, and so on. After listening for a while, Chu Mu finally heard someone talk about the relevant forces within Demon Shaker City. This made him even more focused, instantly ignoring the outside world. Suddenly, 3 figures walked over in a row. They seemed to be rampaging. Chu Mu quickly shifted his feet to the side, but the 3 figures seemed to have planned it beforehand. They actually shifted their feet as well. They were too close to each other, and there were too many people around them. Add to that the fact that his attention was suddenly focused on something else. Chu Mu was unable to avoid making contact with one of them. "Do you have a death wish? How dare you bump into me?" The other party was like a volcano that had suddenly erupted. His eyes shone with a terrifying light as he roared and extended his hand to grab Chu Mu's shoulder. Chu Mu took a step to the side and easily avoided the other party's grab. At the same time, the other 2 quickly moved to form a triangular encirclement. The surrounding swordsmen seemed to have realized what was going to happen and quickly scattered. Chu Mu was startled at first, but then his eyes flashed. He immediately understood that the sudden appearance of these 3 people and the fact that they were charging at him in a row was definitely premeditated. Could it be that the matter of him killing those red-robed swordsmen had already been discovered? No, that couldn't be right. These 3 people's attire was completely different from the red-robed swordsmen. They shouldn't be from the Red Coat Association. Since they weren't from the Red Coat Association, why would they attack him? They were looking at him with mocking and ferocious gazes, like hungry wolves staring at a fat lamb. Although he still didn't know what their intentions were, Chu Mu wouldn't just sit there and wait for his death. The sword aura emitted by these 3 people wasn't strong. Chu Mu could tell that 2 of them were at the peak of the initial Qi transformation stage, and one of them was at the level of Qi transformation stage Deshang. Judging by their age, they should all be above 30. A Qi transformation stage cultivator in their 30s would be an elder in the Qingfeng sword sect. Unfortunately, Qinglan Mountain was located in a remote area with thin spirit Qi. It was not suitable for cultivation, so there were very few Qi transformation stage swordsmen. In places like the border cities and this demon-shaking city, there were not many Qi transformation stage swordsmen in their 30s. There are even many Qi transformation stage swordsmen in their 20s because of the environment. You son of a bitch, you offended me. How are you going to pay for this? The swordsman on Chu Mu's right said with a face full of hostility. His cheeks twitched as he grinned. The surrounding swordsmen seemed to be used to it. They looked at Chu Mu with pity in their eyes. Chu Mu seemed to understand that the purpose of these three people seemed to be to treat him as a fat lamb and wanted to extort him. However, he couldn't rule out other reasons. What's with that look? Are you going to resist? The swordsman in front of Chu Mu grinned malevolently as he stared at Chu Mu. He chuckled and said, "From the moment you appeared outside the city, I noticed you. It's your first time in Demon Shaking City, right? You must be very curious about Demon Shaking City and want to understand its rules as soon as possible. Right now, we're here to teach you the rules of Demon Shaker City. Since you bumped into one of my brothers, you have to pay for it. Considering that his injuries aren't serious, I'll give you 10,000 low-grade spirit stones or something of the same value, and we'll forget about it. Or else what?" Chu Mu's expression didn't change as he asked unhurriedly, "Ha ha ha ha, listen, where did this stupid bird come from? How dare he ask what else?" The swordsman on the opposite side of Chu Mu laughed wildly. Then he stopped laughing and stared coldly at Chu Mu. "No matter where you come from, the Demon Shaking City has its own rules. Here, you're not allowed to use sword Qi to attack. Otherwise, you will be violating the rules of the city and will be executed. Do you think you alone can fight against the three of us with just your sword skills?" Chu Mu suddenly understood. So, there was such a rule in the Demon Shaking City. Sword Qi was not allowed to attack because they were afraid that sword Qi would cause large-scale destruction. Chu Mu also understood something else from the swordsman's words. Fighting was allowed in the Demon Shaking City as long as they did not use sword Qi. "Stupid bird, I will give you two choices. First, obediently hand over 10,000 low-grade spirit stones, or something of the same value. Second, we will take it from you. If you do that, you will be killed by us." The swordsman on the opposite side of Chu Mu sneered. The swordsman on the left and right side of him also had a ferocious expression on his face. Looking at the surrounding swordsmen, not only did they not stop him, they even looked as though they were watching a good show. Some of them even yawned out of boredom. It was as though something like this was not uncommon in the Demon Shaking City. Chu Mu quickly sorted out what he had learned. He roughly knew that killing was allowed in the Demon Shaking City. As long as one did not use sword Qi to attack, killing people would not violate any rules. What a chaotic place! Chu Mu secretly sighed. An inexplicable feeling of excitement rose up from the bottom of his heart. Was he excited about being able to kill people? Chu Mu's pupils instantly contracted, and he felt an impulse to unsheath his sword. The sword was a lethal weapon, and the sword technique was a killing technique. That was Chu Mu's motto. It was also the core of his sword technique. "I have always believed in getting what I want with my own hands. Since you fellows want what I am carrying, I will have to do it myself," Chu Mu said calmly. The three swordsmen were stunned. The same was true for the surrounding swordsmen. All of them stared at Chu Mu with looks of disbelief. It was as though they were looking at a monster. "In that case, you can die." The three swordsmen surrounding Chu Mu instantly unsheathed their swords. The three swords stabbed towards Chu Mu from different angles. As expected, there was not a single trace of sword Qi fluctuation. Instead, there was a faint trace of sword intent, which increased the power of the three swords. In the next moment, The three swords would tear apart Chu Mu's protective sword chi and pierce through his body. The void velocity sword was unsheathed. No one saw how Chu Mu had unsheathed his sword. They could only vaguely see three blurry sword light appear and disappear in an instant. By the time they could focus and see clearly, Chu Mu's posture had not changed. The sword in his left hand was also the same as before. However, the three swordsmen surrounding Chu Mu maintained their posture of thrusting their swords out. Their swords were halfway out, almost touching Chu Mu's protective sword chi. However, their eyes were wide open. They were filled with confusion and confusion. Flowers of blood bloomed from their throats as streams of blood flowed down. In the next moment, the three of them swayed slightly and fell backwards. There were three bangs and dust filled the air. The sound also woke up the surrounding swordsmen. Hiss, hiss! The swordsmen all gasped. Their faces were filled with disbelief and shock. They no longer looked at Chu Mu with pity or ridicule. Instead, they were filled with fear and awe. What kind of sword speed is that? That's too terrifying. I didn't even see how he attacked. All sorts of discussions rang out uncontrollably. When Chu Mu swept his gaze over them, these swordsmen, who roamed the chaotic demon plains with their heads hanging at their waists, suddenly felt their hair stand on end. They all subconsciously took a small step back. Chu Mu withdrew his gaze and looked at the three corpses. He very skillfully took out some spiritual stones from their robes. As for their three swords, Chu Mu did not care for them at all. They were only medium-grade swords. "Sir, if you don't care for these three medium-grade swords, why don't you sell them to me?" Suddenly, a voice rang out in the crowd. The person squeezed through the crowd and appeared before Chu Mu. He smiled at Chu Mu and waited for Chu Mu's reply. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 387. This was the first time Chu Mu had taken a hot bath in 3 months. Once a swordsman reached the Qi transformation realm, his body would have been purified once, and the filth he produced every day would be much less than that of an ordinary person. Along the way, Chu Mu would also clean himself a little whenever he came across a water source. Therefore, although he looked down on the outside, he was not dirty at all. His whole body was soaked in the big tub. The water was very clear and gave people a feeling of liveliness. There were a few palm-sized jade-colored leaves in the tub, which looked very much like a human's palm with 5 fingers spread out. The veins on the leaves were like the lines on the palm, clearly visible. These were the leaves of the jade palm tree, which had the effect of calming the mind and relaxing the muscles when soaked in water. 1 leaf was worth 10 low-grade spirit stones, which was quite precious. The faint scent of wood rose up along with the hot steam, like a burst of white smoke, filling the surroundings. Chu Mu's body became faintly discernible in the middle of it. His whole body was submerged in the water, with only his head exposed. He leaned back against the edge of the tub. The design of the tub was ingenious, with a depression that allowed people to lean their head against it without pain. Unknowingly, Chu Mu slowly fell asleep, and his body gradually relaxed while soaking in the hot water. Time passed slowly, and unknowingly half an hour had passed. Suddenly, there was a rhythmic knock on the door, waking Chu Mu up. He opened his eyes, and a sharp light shot out like a sword. After a breath, his eyes became clear. The water in the tub had already turned cold, but his energy had never been so abundant. As he got up, the sound of water splashing could be heard. Countless small streams of water quickly flowed down from Chu Mu's body, dripping into the tub and making a slight sound, creating countless ripples on the water. After years of cultivation, Chu Mu's body was very strong, without a trace of fat, and his skin was very smooth. Although he did not have bulky muscles, every muscle was bulging and the outline was clear. He looked 70% masculine and 30% gentle. If this kind of body was placed on Earth, who knew how many young women would fall for it. With a light leap, Chu Mu was like a dragon leaping out of the water, creating a splash. Chu Mu jumped out of the bathtub and landed on the side. His every movement made the muscles on his body seem to be wriggling, as if they were wriggling dragons. They were full of powerful explosive force and had a strong sense of beauty. He grabbed the towel next to him and wiped his entire body. After drying himself, he picked up the newly bought clothes and put them on. The moon-white robe fit him very well, and his long black hair was tied up with a golden thread. His fair face seemed to be shining with divine light, and he looked like a handsome young master in a chaotic world. Holding the void speed sword with his left hand, Chu Mu walked out of the bathroom in big steps. He walked towards the door and opened it. Someone was standing outside the door. It was the waiter of the inn. He stared at Chu Mu in a daze, unable to react in time. When Chu Mu first checked in, he was dressed in a shabby manner. His face couldn't even be seen clearly. The waiter originally thought that Chu Mu was a middle-aged man who was down and out. But now, it turned out to be a young man who was less than 20 years old. Although he couldn't be considered a handsome man, and was even a little ordinary, he looked very charming. It made people want to take a second look at him. "What's the matter?" Chu Mu asked indifferently. "Sir, there is a guest who wants to meet you in the 3rd room on the 2nd floor." The waiter's body shook, and he quickly came back to his senses. "Got it." Chu Mu nodded, but he didn't immediately leave the room. The waiter didn't rush him. His task was to tell Chu Mu that someone was waiting for him in the lobby. As for whether Chu Mu would go or not, it had nothing to do with him. This inn was called Windward Inn, and it was the largest inn in the demon-shaking city. There was no difference in the level of the guest rooms, and they were all the same. One night's stay would cost 100 low-grade spirit stones. This was the same price as the inns in the border city. The rooms in this inn weren't small, and the overall layout was good. Chu Mu was quite satisfied. After killing the 3 swordsmen who tried to extort Chu Mu left and went to a clothing store to buy a few sets of clothes and shoes. He then booked a room at the Windward Inn and paid 300 low-quality spirit stones. After thinking for a while, Chu Mu opened the door again and went downstairs after locking the door with the speed sky sword. Windward Inn was a combination of rooms and restaurants. The 1st floor was the lobby, and it was very spacious. There were hundreds of tables, and almost every table was occupied. Some were even full, and it was very lively. The 2nd floor was the rooms, which were the so-called private rooms. They were more exquisite and quiet, and the soundproofing was good. Naturally, the cost was higher. Chu Mu went to the 3rd room and knocked on the door. "Please come in." A familiar voice came from inside. Chu Mu's eyes flashed, and he roughly knew who was looking for him. He pushed the door open and stepped in. There was a table in the room, and there were steaming dishes on the table. There was also a person who saw Chu Mu. He quickly stood up and cupped his fists to greet him. However, he suddenly stopped, and his face was blank. "Sir, are you that person?" This person reacted after 3 breaths. He quickly asked and saluted with his sword. "Why are you looking for me?" Chu Mu asked. "It is indeed you." The person's eyes lit up. He smiled and gestured with his hand. "Please take a seat. My name is Han Yi, and I am the leader of the Iron Sword Gang in the demon-shaking city." Chu Mu's expression didn't change. He pulled a chair and sat down with an extraordinary aura. He had never heard of the Iron Sword Gang, and so far he had only heard of the Red Clothed Association. However, this Han Yi was the person who had bought the 3 mid-grade swords from him. He had asked for 10,000 low-grade spirit stones, which was much higher than the market price. Chu Mu didn't refuse. It seemed like this Han Yi had something to talk to him about. Coincidentally, Chu Mu also wanted to understand the situation in the demon-shaking city as soon as possible. This would be helpful for his training. "May I know your name?" Han Yi asked again with a smile. "Chu Mu." Chu Mu replied calmly. "Then I won't call you sir. I'll just call you little brother Chu." Han Yi was obviously the kind of person who liked to get familiar with others. He immediately said, Brother Chu, is this little Brother Chu's first time in the demon-shaking city? May I know where you are from? Just say what you want. Chu Mu said. All right, little Brother Chu is straightforward. I like this kind of temperament. After failing to find out more about Chu Mu, Han Yi didn't show any embarrassment or dissatisfaction. Instead, he clapped his hands and agreed with Chu Mu. I'll just say it. The demon-shaking city is different from other places. Although it is under the jurisdiction of the great Kuan dynasty in name, there are rules here. Even a powerful dragon has to follow the rules here. Otherwise, the consequences will be dire. Please enlighten me, Chu Mu said seriously. He knew that with his current strength, he could be said to be invincible under the Qi High Realm. Even some of the Qi High Realm warriors might not be able to defeat him. However, after watching the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero, he knew that he wouldn't be able to block even one strike from either of them. Maybe in a place like the demon-shaking city, there might not be any sword heroes, but there would definitely be peak Qi High warriors. Currently, he wasn't a match for any of them. There might even be 9th Transformation Realm or Origin Realm warriors. Therefore, before he had absolute strength, he would have to follow the Romans. The way of the sword was to cut through all obstacles, but it wasn't to be reckless. The courage of the sword was the most important thing. Han Ye's eyes flashed with an almost imperceptible trace of admiration. Previously, when he saw Chu Mu's sword attack, his sword speed was unbelievably fast. Even he, a peak stage transforming Qi swordsman, could only faintly see a sliver of it, although Chu Mu's sword Qi was only at the initial Qi transforming realm. His strength must be extraordinary. With one strike, he took 3 lives. His speed, accuracy, and ruthlessness were all displayed to the extreme. After killing the people, his expression didn't change at all. With one look, Han Yi knew that there must have been a lot of dead souls under his sword. Plus, he was so young, so he must have come from an extraordinary background. People like this were usually arrogant. They might think that they were better than the heavens. Han Yi had been in the demon-shaking city for many years, and he had seen a lot of foreign swordsmen. He didn't expect that Chu Mu not only didn't have that kind of arrogance, he would ask for advice when he didn't know anything. This kind of character was truly valuable. If this person doesn't die prematurely, his future achievements will be amazing. Han Yi said to himself. Thinking of this, Han Yi also became serious. He paid more attention to Chu Mu and quickly explained to Chu Mu. There are many factions in Demon-Shaking City. The weak ones have Sword Aura Realm Swordsmen, while the strong ones have Origin Realm Swordsmen. The moment Han Yi spoke, Chu Mu's eyes instantly lit up. Indeed, there really were Origin Realm Swordsmen in Demon-Shaking City. Han Yi acted as if he didn't see the flash of light in Chu Mu's eyes and continued. However, 9th Transformation Realm and Origin Realm experts don't usually appear. The ones in charge of various affairs in the various factions are mostly Qi High Realm and Qi Transformation Realm experts. Chu Mu listened without saying a word. He needed more information. Of course, he could choose to not know anything and just focus on cultivation. However, there were many conflicts in the world of swordsmen. Sometimes, you wouldn't even know why someone wanted to kill you. All kinds of troubles could appear at any time. If he didn't know anything, it would be a mess. Although there are many forces in the demon-shaking city, there are only 7 or 8 of them that are powerful. Among them, there are 3 major forces: Red Dress Association, Dazzling Dragon Village, and Flaming Tiger Clan. Below them are the Wild Lion Clan, Flying Plume Clan, and Snake Clan. My Iron Sword Clan is also one of them. Han Yi said with a hint of pride in his eyes. To be able to establish a force in the demon-shaking city and become one of the 7 that are powerful was indeed something to be proud of. However, Chu Mu didn't show any surprise. A mere peak Qi transforming realm warrior was already a clan leader. It could be seen that the Iron Sword Clan's overall strength wasn't that strong. As for the Red Flower Association, Dazzling Dragon Village, and Flaming Tiger Clan, Their experts were probably Chi High Realm warriors. He just didn't know if there were any Ninth Transformation Realm or Origin Realm warriors supporting them. Brother Chu, the 3 people that Brother Chu killed today were from the Wild Lion clan. Han Yi said and suddenly revealed the truth. He stared at Chu Mu, hoping to see Chu Mu's expression other than indifference. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. Chu Mu's expression was still indifferent. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 388. Those 3 people have some status in the Wild Lion Gang. The news of you killing them may have already been found out by the Wild Lion Gang's gangmaster. No matter how you look at it, the Wild Lion Gang won't let you go. Han Yi continued to speak and stared at Chu Mu. Unfortunately, Chu Mu's expression remained normal. Brother Chu, this is the first time you have come to the Demon Shaker City. You don't know the rules here. Perhaps you are strong, but 2 fists cannot fight against 4 hands. There are many experts in the Wild Lion Gang. Once they decide to deal with you, I'm afraid you will be in a precarious situation. Han Yi emphasized his tone, as if he wanted to let Chu Mu know that he was in a terrible situation. His efforts seemed to be effective. Chu Mu showed a hint of astonishment. Then what should I do? Seeing Chu Mu's expression, a hint of a smile flashed across Han Yi's eyes. He thought to himself that Chu Mu was still too young. He was still unable to maintain his composure even if a mountain collapsed in front of him. There are 2 ways to solve this. Han Yi cleared his throat. He was in high spirits, as if he had gained the upper hand in the negotiation. The first way is to stay in the Windward Inn. As long as you stay in the inn, even the 3 major powers won't dare to make a move here. It is said that the owner of the Windward Inn is an Origin Realm expert. If anyone dares to make a move in the inn, they will be violating the rules of the Windward Inn. In serious cases, they will be executed. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. He didn't expect the Windward Inn to have such a backer. Up until now, the Origin Realm was the strongest sword practitioner realm that Chu Mu knew. Brother Chu, do you know that there are 3 major powers in the Demon Shaker City that cannot be provoked? The Windward Inn is one of them. Han Yi laughed heartily. He felt that he had broken Chu Mu's state of mind and taken the initiative. He appeared to be in high spirits, as he said. The second thing that cannot be provoked is the city, Lord's Mansion. The city, Lord's Mansion of the Demon Shaking City may seem like a decoration without any authority, but it is still someone sent by the great Kuin royal family. The city, Lord's strength is extraordinary, and there are many experts in the mansion. Unless there is no other choice, they will not offend the city, Lord's Mansion. The third is the Yang family's trading company. The Yang family's trading company never interferes with the power struggles of the Yao Yao city. They only do business. There were a few Chi-Hai realm warriors who wanted to rob the Yang family's trading company. But before they could even get anything, they were all killed by the powerful warriors of the Yang family. Chu Mu recalled the merchant group he'd encountered when he'd entered the demon chaos plains. The banner of the merchant group had a large Yang character written on it. Perhaps that was the Yang clan trading company. I've digressed. I've already mentioned the first method, but since little brother Chu has come here, I don't think you're here to stay in the inn. Therefore, this method is useless. Han Yi changed the topic and continued. The second method is to join a faction that is not inferior to the Wild Lion Gang. That way, you won't have to fear the Wild Lion Gang. Although my Iron Sword Gang has not been established as long as the Wild Lion Gang, our strength is not inferior. Today, the leader of the Iron Sword Gang, Han Yi, sincerely invites little brother Chu to join my Iron Sword Gang and become a member. With little brother Chu's strength, you can definitely become an elder of the gang. Finally, Han Yi spoke of his purpose for looking for Chu Mu. He stared at Chu Mu with eyes full of passion. If he didn't know Han Ye's intentions, Chu Mu would have thought that Han Yi was interested in him. I'm only here to cultivate. Chu Mu didn't give a direct answer. He didn't hesitate because of Han Ye's well-intentioned explanation. Han Ye was stunned as he looked at Chu Mu. Seeing the determination in Chu Mu's eyes, Han Ye knew that this was a person with an incomparably strong will. He wouldn't change his mind easily because of other people's opinions. If that's the case, then my Iron Sword Gang is unlucky. But if little brother Chu needs any help, just say it. If I, Han Ye, can do it, I will definitely not refuse. Han Ye was also a straightforward person. He didn't beat around the bush and didn't get angry because of Chu Mu's rejection. Okay. Chu Mu smiled. He felt that he could make friends with Han Ye. As for how far he could make friends with him, that would depend on what kind of person Han Ye was. Ha 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 ha, straightforward. Come, let's drink and eat. Han Ye waved his hand, looking like a gang leader. They chatted while drinking and eating. Although he couldn't get Chu Mu to join the Iron Sword Gang, Han Ye didn't give up. He also tried to sound out Chu Mu's background. Although Chu Mu wasn't as good as Han Ye in terms of communication skills and eloquence, the conversation between him and Han Ye was like a fight between two swordsmen in Chu Mu's eyes. He was able to capture the core of every word Han Ye said and the meaning behind it in an instant. He responded with the shortest and most direct words. It was as if he had blocked and counterattacked with his sword. Every word was like a sharp sword. After they finished eating, Han Ye didn't know anything except Chu Mu's name. On the contrary, Chu Mu learned more about the Demon Shaker City from Han Ye during their chat. This gave Chu Mu a deeper understanding of the Demon Shaker City. Where did he come from? What family or force did he belong to? What was his sword chi cultivation like? How strong was he? And so on and so forth. He didn't know anything. Han Ye couldn't help but look at Chu Mu with a strange look. He thought to himself, is this person an old ghost in the guise of a young man? He had never had such an experience. He had racked his brains trying to find out more about the other party, but he couldn't make it too obvious. Often, the other party would throw off his rhythm with a simple sentence, forcing him to reconsider his thoughts. This made him feel more tired than fighting with a sword master for 2 hours. Sword fighting? Han Ye's mind flashed. He thought to himself that the conversation between him and Chu Mu wasn't a different type of sword fighting. Thinking of this, Han Ye suddenly felt that some of his bottlenecks were loosening. Brother Chu, I have learned a lot from talking with you today. If you have any trouble in the future, take this Iron Sword token and come to our gang. As long as it is something we can do, we will not refuse. Han Ye immediately got up, took out a brown Iron Sword token, and handed it to Chu Mu. He quickly said, I feel that I am about to break through the bottleneck of my swordsmanship. I will take my leave now. Let's chat another day. Chu Mu looked at the Iron Sword token and smiled. He put it into the middle grade space bracelet and then got up and walked out of the room. As soon as he arrived at the Demon Shaker City, he was killed by the 3 swordsmen who wanted to blackmail him. Then he went to the Windward Inn to take a nap. Chu Mu didn't plan to go back to his room. Instead, he went downstairs. There were some things that hearing was not as good as seeing. Going out to train didn't mean that one would have to fight nonstop. The roads one walked, the scenery one saw, the things one heard, and so on were all indispensable parts of training. For example, after witnessing the battle between the Gold Fragment Sword Hero and the Wild Dragon Sword Hero, Chu Mu had gained a lot. Also, after chatting with Chu Mu, Han Ye had comprehended something and was about to break through the bottleneck of his swordsmanship. Everything in the world existed for a reason. Even a speck of dust might contain some kind of mystery. Once he understood some kind of principle, he might gain some kind of benefit in an instant. It would be of great help to him now or in the future. The lobby on the first floor was still bustling with noise and excitement. Chu Mu glanced around and walked toward the entrance of the inn. At a table on the first floor, a middle-aged swordsman stared at Chu Mu with some doubts. Then his eyes fell on the void sword in Chu Mu's left hand. His whole body shook, and he hurriedly whispered something to the other swordsman next to him. All of a sudden, the other swordsmen stood up one after another. The swordsmen at the next table stood up as well. Their faces were gloomy as they strode out of the inn and chased after Chu Mu. Chu Mu slowly walked on the streets of the demon-shaking city. In terms of chaos, the demon-shaking city was even more chaotic than the desolate border city. In terms of strength, the swordsmen here should also be above the desolate border city. After all, the swordsmen here had to deal with demonic beasts, and the fact that they could survive meant that their strength was not ordinary. Are you sure it is him? Although he looks different, I recognize that sword. Even if it is not him, it is definitely related to him. All right, capture him for me. After a short conversation, the swordsmen sped up. Some of them overtook Chu Mu and turned around to intercept him. They formed a circle with the other swordsmen, surrounding Chu Mu. Chu Mu glanced around and found that the swordsmen were all at the Qi transformation realm, from the entry level to Desheng. Brat, are you the one who killed 3 of our brothers? The leading Qi transformation Desheng swordsman stared at Chu Mu with a ferocious expression. His eyes were bloodshot, and the baleful qi around his body was extremely shocking. This kind of stare meant that his hands were stained with blood. Ordinary people would feel their legs go soft after being stared at like this. The other swordsmen also stared at Chu Mu with ferocious expressions. Their killing intent almost froze the air around them. The people around them quickly backed away and held their breaths. Who is that guy? How could he be so unlucky as to be targeted by the Mad Lion Gang? Not sure, but it sounds like he was targeted because he killed the Mad Lion Gang members. I know it is that poor guy from today. I thought he was a poor man, but I didn't expect him to be such a young man. How do you know it is him? Very simple, just look at his sword. Chu Mu couldn't help feeling a bit helpless. He thought that after washing up and changing his clothes, no one would be able to recognize him. He didn't expect the Void Speed Sword to expose him. I was just casually sending them on their way. Chu Mu smiled. He was the one who killed them, so Chu Mu naturally wouldn't deny it. Very good, you have guts. Then, do you want us to casually send you on your way, or do you want to obediently follow us back to await your punishment? You can choose for yourself. The Qi Transformation Desheng swordsman coldly said. Every word was filled with a dense killing intent. The other swordsmen all gripped their sword hilts. More than 10 killing intent locked onto Chu Mu. As long as Chu Mu showed the slightest sign of resistance, they would instantly attack. With more than 10 swords attacking together, Chu Mu would become a beehive in an instant. A glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. Chu Mu took the dozen or so swordsmen into his perception. In the next breath, he would pull out his sword and instantly kill the dozen or so swordsmen. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 389. Killing intent spread out and locked onto Chu Mu. The surrounding air seemed to have frozen, and the surrounding swordsmen could not help but hold their breaths. They knew that a poor swordsman had killed 3 members of the Wild Lion Gang with a terrifying sword speed in the morning. But now he was facing more than 10 swordsmen of the Wild Lion Gang, and each of them was at least at the Qi transformation realm. Sword Qi was not allowed to attack in the demon-shaking city, but it was allowed to protect one's body. Chu Mu's sword Qi seemed to be at the Qi transformation realm, and such a strong protective sword Qi could not possibly block the attack of a low-grade or mid-grade sword. The Wild Lion Gang knew that Chu Mu's sword was very fast, so they were all looking for the best opportunity to kill him in one strike. From this, it could be seen that the swordsmen of the demon-shaking city were not idiots. Chu Mu was also looking for the best opportunity. He could see that although the Wild Lion Gang's swordsman's sword aura cultivation wasn't high, due to their rich battle experience, they had very few openings. If Chu Mu wanted to instantly draw his sword and kill these people, it wouldn't be easy. The swordsmen of the Wild Lion Gang squinted their eyes and a sharp, cold light flashed in their pupils. Their fingers holding their swords moved slightly, and the muscles on their arms contracted rhythmically. It was obvious that they were about to attack. Chu-mu was also thinking about the best path of attack in his mind. In the next moment, it would be the moment of life and death between the two sides. "Stop!" A loud shout was heard, and it sounded a bit hurried. Then a figure separated the crowd and walked over with large strides. His whole body was emitting a frightening sharp light, as if a high-grade sword was slashing towards them. The sudden sharp light instantly broke the momentum of the swordsmen of the Wild Lion Gang and stopped them from attacking. Their expressions changed, and their killing intent became even sharper. "Who dares to stop my Wild Lion Gang?" The leading Qi Transformation Realm swordsman, Desheng, looked over with an ominous glint in his eyes and shouted with a threatening, killing intent. "If you are Li Guangshi, then you have the right to say that to me." The shout was heard again, and the momentum was even more shocking. "It's him, Iron Sword Gang's leader, Han Yi. I've heard that the Iron Sword Gang's leader is the most low-key. He doesn't bring anyone with him when he goes out. It seems that it's true." Chu-mu also relaxed. Since Han Yi had appeared, then this battle was over. "Chief Han, this person killed 3 of our brothers this morning. He has a grudge with our gang. I hope that Chief Han won't interfere, so as to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings and spoiling the friendship between our 2 gangs." Facing Han Ye's aura, the Wild Lion Gang's Qi Gathering Desheng swordsman clenched his teeth and said with difficulty, "What a joke! What proof do you have to prove that he killed the Wild Lion Gang's men this morning? Not to mention, he's my Han Ye's friend. So what if he killed the Wild Lion Gang's men?" Han Yi laughed loudly. His imposing aura caused the other party to tremble. Han Ye's words made the expressions of the Wild Lion Gang's swordsmen turn ugly. They wished they could draw their swords and kill Han Yi as well. However, they knew that they would not be able to kill Han Yi. Although they were not allowed to use sword chi to attack in Demon Shaking City, they could use sword chi to defend. With their strength, it would not be easy for them to break through Han Ye's protective sword chi. By the time they broke through Han Ye's protective sword chi, Han Ye's sword chi would be enough to kill them all. Not to mention, the Wild Lion Gang's leader was wearing a mid-grade armor. As someone who could fight against the Wild Lion Gang's leader, it was impossible for Han Yi to not have an armor. "Chief Han, are you going to interfere in this matter today?" The Wild Lion Gang's Qi Transformation Desheng swordsman clenched his teeth again. A trace of blood seeped out from his gums. "Scram! If you have any problems, tell Li Guangshi to come find me." Han Yi said angrily. The aura of a gang leader was incomparably sharp. "All right, I will relay sect leader Han's exact words to our sect leader." Since Han Yi had appeared and interfered in this matter, killing Chu-mu was no longer possible. The Wild Lion Gang's dozen swordsmen couldn't help but stare fiercely at Chu-mu for a few breaths of time. Their incomparably sharp gazes were filled with killing intent. If looks could kill, Chu-mu would already be riddled with holes. Since he had lost the opportunity to draw his sword, Chu-mu ignored their murderous gazes and looked at Han Yi. He could not help but feel helpless, but he did not say anything. After all, the reason Han Yi had come was most likely out of kindness. He was standing up for him. The conflict between him and the Wild Lion Gang would definitely deepen. "Brother Chu, are you all right?" Just now, I felt the bottleneck in my swordsmanship loosening. When I hurried downstairs, I saw the Wild Lion Gang's people. At first, I did not think much of them. Later, I thought that they might be here to cause trouble for you. So I hurried back, Han Yi said with a laugh. In addition to his own strength, he was able to single-handedly establish the Iron Sword Gang and develop it into one of the top forces in Shifter Shaker City. Han Yi boasted that he was very good at reading people. This was something that had been proven many times before. Thus, he believed that Chu Mu was not an ordinary swordsman. Thus, he wanted to recruit Chu Mu into the Iron Sword Gang. Unfortunately, Chu Mu's intentions were clear. Thus, Han Yi took a step back and tried to befriend Chu Mu. Speaking of which, Han Yi did not suffer any losses. It was just a meal. As for the conflict between him and the Wild Lion Gang, one more member was not too much, and one less member was not too little. Han Yi cleverly pointed out that he had temporarily given up on the opportunity to break through his swordsmanship's bottleneck and rushed back to help Chu Mu. As a result, he left a deeper impression on Chu Mu. For Han Yi, the strength of the Iron Sword Gang was the most important thing. Breaking through his own swordsmanship's bottleneck was relatively secondary. Moreover, as long as he returned and spent a few days to sort out his thoughts, the chances of breaking through were still very high. Using such a small price to exchange for the friendship of a future expert that he had high hopes for was worth it. Even if Chu Mu could not become an expert, Han Yi would not suffer any losses. All in all, this was an investment that would benefit him greatly if he won, and a small loss if he lost. So why not? What he did not know was that his arrival had actually saved the lives of more than a dozen swordsmen from the Wild Lion Gang. Sorry to trouble you. Chu Mu smiled and did not say anything else. Haha, it's fine. However, this cannot go on. Brother Chu, you have to think of a way. Han Yi smiled and said, If there is anything you need me to do, feel free to come to me. After saying that, Han Yi waved his hand and left. Chu Mu thought for a moment and estimated that what had happened here would soon spread out. It would not be good for him to wander around Shifter Shaker City. He might as well return to Windward Tavern. Gang leader, that damnable kid has left Shifter Shaker City by himself and is heading to Shifter Chaos Plains. Very good. Bring some brothers and bring his head back to me. I want to see what kind of expression Han you will have when I deliver his head to him. Yes, gang leader. After staying in Windward Tavern for a day and making some minor adjustments, Chu Mu left the tavern and left Shifter Shaker City for Shifter Chaos Plains. Shifter Chaos Plains was the habitat of demonic beasts. There were also many spiritual herbs, ores, metals, and other treasures. Moreover, fighting with powerful demonic beasts was a good way to temper one's swordsmanship. Besides that, it could also increase one's knowledge. It could be considered as killing many birds with one stone. Shifter Chaos Plains was called a plains, but it actually included rivers, forests, mountains, and so on. However, it was mostly plains, which was why it was called a plains. Apart from Chu Mu, there were also many swordsmen who left Shifter Shaker City in groups of 3 to 5 and entered Shifter Chaos Plains. They went deeper and deeper, gradually disappearing into the distance. Only Chu Mu was left behind. The deeper Chu Mu went, the denser the demonic chi in the air became. Suddenly, a slight sound of wind breaking rang out. It approached him at lightning speed. Chu Mu reacted extremely quickly. He unsheathed his void velocity sword and slashed out with a backhand slash. The sword light was like a bolt of lightning, leaving a faint mark in the air. With a sizzling sound, blood splattered. Then 2 sounds rang out. It was a snake that was nearly 2 meters long and as thick as an arm. Its entire body was covered in dark green scales that flickered with a faint luster. It was still alive after being slashed in half by the void velocity sword. It struggled on the ground, leaving behind marks. The snake's head rose up again, opening its mouth to bite at Chu Mu with its venomous fangs. The sword light flashed again, and the snake's head was cleaved apart like tofu. It was truly dead. However, the other part of the snake's body was still wriggling, showing its tenacious vitality. Low-rank, mid-rank, demonic beast. Although he did not know the name of the demonic beast, Chu Mu could tell from its aura that it was a low-rank, mid-rank, demonic beast. It was equivalent to a chi transformation sword artist. Obviously, this snake demonic beast had thought that Chu Mu was its prey and had suddenly attacked him. Unexpectedly, the prey had been killed by the hunter. With a flick of the sword, The sharp sword cut open the snake's abdomen. He picked out the snake's gallbladder and a dark green ball the size of a longan. The ball was emitting waves of demonic chi. The snake's gallbladder was directly thrown into his mouth and swallowed. This thing could detoxify and improve one's eyesight. The snake's gallbladder was even more effective than normal snakes. The dark green ball was the demonic nucleus, which was the crystallization of the demonic beast's demonic chi. It was similar to the dantian of a human swordsman. After digesting the snake's gallbladder, a refreshing feeling circled around his eyes. Chu Mu seemed to feel that his eyesight had improved a little. Seems like I need to hunt more snake-type demonic beasts. Their gallbladders will improve my eyesight. Chu Mu thought to himself as he skinned the snake. Luckily, there was a water source nearby. After washing it, he set up a fire and began to roast it. Not long after, a thick meat aroma filled the air. Golden, translucent oil seeped out of the meat and dripped down. It sizzled as it was roasted by the fire. Chu Mu took out some seasoning powder and sprinkled it on top of the meat, causing the meat aroma to become even thicker and more mouth-watering. After taking a small bite, the soft and tender feeling made Chu Mu close his eyes and enjoy it. His mouth was full of fragrance. It had to be said that this snake demon beast was very fierce, but its meat was very delicious. Of course, not all demonic beast meat could be eaten. However, any demonic beast meat that could be eaten would not taste bad. Moreover, eating it often could strengthen one's body and help with the cultivation of sword chi. Not long after, a few kilograms of snake meat was all in Chu Mu's stomach, giving him a sense of satisfaction. Suddenly, there was the sound of wind being torn apart. Following that, one figure after another quickly approached. You've chosen a pretty good burial ground for yourself. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation.